atomic gigantification was a sweeping Japan nation when along came a dude with an ultra attitude, a Kamen Rider who's the greatest kicker of Japan. And of all, man, life's too short now, baby, to not talk big now, baby.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, back to Kaiju Conversation. I'm your host, Elijah, and joining me, as always, my lovely co-host and editor.
Hello, I am Rex.
And we are back at it again for yet another episode. We are entering into November. And Rex, do you know what November means?
I think it's about to be the birthday of a very, very famous franchise.
No, it means that we have to grow beards.
Right.
Right.
That's true.
We have to be like every other Godzilla fan and have a beard.
You're not a true Godzilla fan if you don't have a neck beard.
I would say not everybody has a neck beard. But a beard, oddly enough, Godzilla fans love their beards.
That is very true. I've seen a lot of them.
Speaking of Godzilla and Godzilla fans and whatnot, to get us back on track, November is, in fact, the birthday of one Godzilla.
One biggest lizard.
The biggest of lizards. The most radioactive. So, for November, with it being Godzilla's birthday, every November we do Godzilla Month. And we are here to start Godzilla Month. Now, before we get into Godzilla Month, I want to know, Rex, how have you been? We have not talked. We have struggled to talk this last week. 2 weeks, actually, because we skipped last week because we were both really busy.
Real. Yeah, I've been good. Been good. I would say I've been chilling, but actually I've been quite busy, unfortunately, to my dismay.
What you been up to?
Largely assignments is the main thing.
Do you have an update on your short film? I don't think we've heard an update in a little while.
At the moment, it's like we've got a rough cut. It's about to be finished. I think it'll be finished sometime early next week, probably Monday, Tuesday. I think.
Gotcha.
It has to be. I don't think there's much of a choice. Granted, I know the director technically wants to do an extended cut because I think lengthwise, I think apparently we're gonna might be forced to delete one scene that he really likes in it, which is what it is. That happens.
Please tell me they're gonna end up cutting the blood splatter and just ruin your life even more.
No, it's not that scene.
Man,
I mean. Look, man,
I really want to see you angry.
Look, I'm so if you see when you see what that looks like, you don't understand how disappointing that was for me.
I'm gonna review it on the show,
bro. It was so.
I'm gonna review the short film on the show
shot,
whenever you show it.
Genuinely, one of the most disappointing things in the past while. For me,
whenever you send it to me, I'm going to do
such high hopes for that shot.
When you send me the link for this short film, I'm going to review it on this show.
I've literally made a short script for just another short film, so I can have an excuse to do that shot again, but better.
Hey, sometimes that's the best thing to do. That's why I direct and write my own stuff. I don't even when as an example, I'm kind of jumping ahead of here, but we're going to go back to somebody pitched me a short film. They want me to make a short film based off of an idea they had. I'm writing the script. Now they're going to get original story credit, of course. I'm not a monster, but I'm going to write the script. I'm going to direct it. It's going to be my work with somebody else's story. So that's I refuse to not write my own scripts, and I refuse to not direct my own stuff. But continue on with this stuff because I'm curious.
But yeah, outside of that and working on other assignments, I'm doing one that's on like the Planet of the Apes movies, like the reboot ones.
What about them?
Like exploring the mocap and like technological advances from them. Mainly the first one, Rise of the Planet of the Apes. But I mean, I'm gonna like no matter what, I'm gonna end up talking about the sequels, which is fine. I don't mind that.
Wouldn't it be better to like look at like Lord of the Rings or like King Kong?
That's not an option. That's not an option for this.
Well, that's kind of stupid because I mean, you like if you're going to talk about mocap, like it's all Andy Serkis, right? And if you're going to talk about mocap from those, you have to go to their origins, which would 100% be King Kong 05, and prior to that, Schmeagol. Is that his name? Schmeagol from Lord of the Rings?
Yeah, Gollum, Smeagol, yeah.
Golem, that's right. So like that's like if you're like that's kind of stupid that they're going to omit those and have you talk about planets.
I probably could like integrate those into the thing. Actually, like there's an area where I could probably talk about them briefly, but the main focus is like it's for the one I'm writing, Rise of the Planet of the Apes.
That annoys me. I could not do this class you're in. I literally could not. It would be like my high school creative writing class where the teacher said, you have a word limit of 1,280 words. If you go past that, I'm done reading it. It's like, this is literally creative writing. You should not be limiting us in what we can write. Like, that's stupid. Oh, I had so many problems with that teacher. We butted heads so much. I think one time I straight up called her like, should you even be teaching this class?
Damn.
It's like you're not even like letting people be creative with their writing. You're just being a dictator over what they write.
That's pretty funny.
Yeah. I was like out for blood. And then I found out she's no longer teaching there. Thank God. Like she was probably the least qualified teacher in that building.
Damn.
And then somebody tried to tell me she was the valedictorian of her class. It's like, really? Really? I do not believe that for a second because all she does is complain about teaching, and she's teaching creative writing, which is literally like creative writing is the butt of the joke because it's like anybody can pass that class. You just have to write something that's creative, and they don't judge your creativity because it's a public school. I need to stop talking about it. I'll go on a whole tirade about that class.
Bro's about to air his dirty laundry about his old high school teachers. Well, to move to a more to move back to a bit lighter of a topic, how have you been on this?
Oh God, that's not a good transition. That's not a good transition. It's not going to be a light topic.
Hey now,
my aunt passed away.
Oh,
my car broke down.
Oh.
I've had drama in a close relationship of mine.
Right.
I've worked a lot of hours.
Right.
Do you feel good about yourself?
I'm sorry for your loss.
Moving past all that stuff, I finished my Bloodspawn interview for Kaiju United. I finished that video. It should be live by the time this episode goes live. So kaijuunited.com, look for the Bloodspawn interview. It's got a video version and a readable version, like text version. That's mine. Pretty cool.
Mm-hmm. Nice.
I also conducted 2 interviews for the podcast, which I think should both be out by now. One of them was Sean Pryor and his book Kaiju Unleashed. And then the other was Billy Dubose on his Godzilla fan film, Godzilla Battle Royale. So that was a lot of fun. I got to do that stuff. And then my weight loss journey, which, have I talked about my weight loss journey on the show? I don't remember.
I believe so, yes.
Okay. So I started, I'm going to say October 1st. I think it was actually in September, but I'm going to say it was October 1st. That was when I started going to the gym. So I was in the mid 200s, lower mids. And right now as of a few hours ago, I actually have lost about 23 pounds.
Nice.
I will say this: not all of it has been the most healthiest ways. A lot of it's in recent times. I've lost a lot of it from stress related stuff. But yeah, I was telling you, it's kind of wild because really what I've done is I've just reduced my calorie intake. So I average about 20,000 steps a day, which is 7 times more than the average American. And so with that analytic, I'm a very active person. I'm very active. And so once you take that into consideration, so I currently eat maybe 300 to 500 calories a day. That's not a lot. Like if I drink 1 to 2 protein shakes a day, and then I might have a snack like a banana.
Mm-hmm.
And that's it. I might have like a beef jerky stick, but I've reduced all of my calories, my carbs, all of that, sodium, sugars. I've reduced all that. And so now I'm always in the negatives, and I'm only eating 1 to 2 meals a day because I am limiting so much. And so I've been able to knock out that much weight. I got about 15, 16 more pounds I want to lose, and then I'll be happy. It'll actually be about the weight I was in middle school. Right now I'm in my high school weight range, which is really nice. But I do hope I can get down to my middle school weight, because that would be wild. I haven't been that light in a little while. So that's my hope. My goal was to do 15 pounds before the end of the year. I've beaten that record. I'm pretty happy. I've beaten that record by a good amount already, actually, almost 50%. So I'm going to continue. I'm going to see if I can, maybe by the end of November, I can be down another 10 pounds. We'll see.
Nice.
So that's it. I've had a very rough, very long last 2 weeks. We haven't recorded in 2 weeks. And yeah, no bueno.
No bueno, hey. Well, I'm curious. I kind of have a guess on what the answer will probably be, given how busy you are, but have you watched any Tokusatsu in this time?
No. So full disclosure, so I have been extremely busy, and because of all of that, I actually have not been able to watch any Tokusatsu, between some engagements I've had with people and work and stress and
some engagements.
problems.
God, you make it sound like you've been on the streets having fights, sir.
That's for me to know and you to draw conclusions in your head. If you think that I'm the type of person that goes out onto the streets and beats up homeless people, I don't know who you are, but okay. That's
self-incrimination right there.
That's a wild assessment of me as a person.
I think you strike me as the type who'd beat up homeless people.
Actually, so funny you said that.
What do you mean, actually?
So if we're talking about assuming my personality, so the other day I did have a little bit of free time, so I went over to a friend's house and we played a game called We're Not Really Strangers. It's a card game. And so you read a prompt off of a card, and then the other players have to guess what your answer would be to it. So as an example, Rex, if I were to read a card and this is one that actually is in there. What movie has made you change your perception, or what movie or book has made you change your perception on life?
Are you going to say The Fabelmans?
So that's what you would say. You would guess, okay, is it The Fabelmans? And then I would say, yes, actually, that one. And I would put Terror of Mechagodzilla and Tetsuo the Iron Man as 3 of the most influential films in my life. So that's how the game works, right? So I did this, and one of the cards I drew was, what was your first impression of me? And I was playing with 2 friends. One of my friends, I want to say she said something along the lines of that you were well put together, that like you had everything under control, like you, because I was her boss. So she was like, the way that you carry yourself and whatnot, I just assumed that you knew what you were doing. And then my other friend, he was like, bro, I thought you just were flirting with everybody. And I was like, what? I was like, huh? And he was like, just the way you interact with everybody. I'm like, I have never been told I have a flirty personality. But he said I had a flirty personality. So, you know what? Maybe people will draw conclusions in their head and think that I'm something I am not.
That's funny.
So that's really all I've got for you.
Damn.
I'm pretty bored. Have you watched any tokusatsu lately?
A little bit. I finally got around to finishing the Senritsu Kaiki Kawasugi series.
Translation, please.
Senritsu Kaiki File Kawasugi. I don't remember what the Senritsu Kaiki Kawasugi means.
Give the listeners a rundown so they know what you're saying.
It's a series of mockumentary type films by Koji Shiraishi, director of like Sadako vs. Kayako, Noroi, Occult, and like Carve the Slip-Mouthed Woman. It's like a series of 10 of those films plus a bunch of short films. They're absolutely amazing. Some of like the best like no budget horror movies you'll ever see, and they get it's an absolutely unhinged franchise, and I love it so much. And yeah, I finally watched the last 2 movies in that series.
How were they?
They were pretty good. Not quite the best movies in the series, but you know, for a series of 10 movies, I'd say that none of them are actually bad. So I think that counts for something.
That's good.
Yeah. God, it's absolutely unhinged though, especially one of the main characters, Jin Kudo. My God. You've never seen a character quite like that. And then outside of that, this isn't tokusatsu, but does kind of relate. Today, I watched the Akira Kurosawa film Ikiru in theaters.
Nice. I have the Blu-ray of that. I still need to watch it.
It's a very, very, very good film.
I've been told it's
shocking
sad.
No one. Yeah, it is a bit depressing. It's like depressing and hopeful, I guess.
Well, isn't the term Ikaru like translates to anger?
To live. No, it's to live.
Gotcha. I knew it was like something that's like actually really profound and it's simplistic.
Yeah. It's a very fitting title for the film, I would say.
I need to watch that. I have a lot of stuff I need to watch. Wait, didn't I watch something? Now that I say that, I feel like I did watch something. Did I watch something? I don't think I did. Wait, I started something. What did I start? I was watching something. Oh my God, what was it? I started a movie. I don't think I finished it. I don't remember.
R.I.P. Well, in that case, if you haven't watched anything, then what the hell are we covering today?
Well, there is some news we could cover.
Oh, and what's that?
Well, first of all, I'm really depresso today. Like, I'm not the one to be happy. Keizo Murase, director of Brush of the God, suit maker for Howl from Beyond the Fog, Mothra, Ghidorah, Gamera, Daimajin, passed away at age 89, October 14th, 2004.
Yeah, his funeral was a few days ago, I heard, as well.
So, just wanted to acknowledge that, not kind of brush that over, but that happened. He's probably one of the last remaining Showa era people from the crew. So with him gone, there's probably not many people left that were on those old original Toho sets, which is kind of depressing.
Yeah.
Now, in a bit more possibly positive news, and you and I have already talked about this, but I felt like we should at least bring it onto the podcast, do a little bit of rumor control, and just kind of what could possibly come out of it. So, Studio Kara has purchased the IPs from P Productions for Spectreman, Monster Prince, Lion Maru, Ambassador Magma, Jaguar Man, The Invisible Man 1970, The Adventures of Mr. Crab, Lion Maru Fun, Tiger 7, Dingeon Zamborger, and Adventure Gobat. The reports say that Hideaki Anno did, which is not accurate. It's his company he owns purchased them.
Yeah.
Now, all we know is that they're handling the licensing for them. So that's really all we know. There were some recent Canadian comic books from Antarctic Press for some of those IPs. That's really it for those characters, sans, I think, some Japanese toys. But it would be nice to see those shows and whatnot get released stateside.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that would be nice if it happens. That would be very nice, actually.
I'd love to finally... I hear so many good things about Spectreman. Like, so many good things.
Oh, a lot of people love Spectreman.
So, I would love to finally watch that show. I'd love to watch Ambassador Magma, because that was the first color Toku show. So that series has, like, significance to Tokusatsu. And then just in general, I think all of them... P Productions has such a short amount of content that I'd love for all of it to get released. Because I think that would be an easy one to just, do what Tsuburaya did. Bulk package deal. Mill Creek puts all of it out. Boom, it's done. Right? And then everybody can watch those shows. So, yeah. We already talked about this. Really, at the end of the day, I think that's really about all we said. Do you have any other thoughts on that?
Not really. It's just one of those things where it's like... I don't have a lot to really say on it until something interesting actually happens.
If something happens, because it also comes down to, is anybody truly interested in licensing these characters? Or, yeah. So literally nothing could come out of this. Literally nothing. But we won't know for a while.
Yeah.
So with that being said, what do we do? I don't really know what to...
Well, it's Godzilla month, so we may as well... the Godzilla Day is around the corner. It might have already happened by the time this comes out. I don't know. So I think we may as well look at that franchise.
I'm always down for more Godzilla.
Likewise. You know what's next?
Our last Godzilla film was Godzilla vs. Hedorah from 1971.
Yes.
So, and we're going in chronological order, right?
Yes.
So, by all accounts, that means we must be covering Godzilla vs. Megalon.
I think you forgot a movie.
Mechagodzilla came after Megalon, right?
No. There's another movie called Earth Defense Directive, Godzilla vs. Gigan.
Shiku Kogeki Miri Gojira Tai Gigan?
It's Gigan. It
is Gigan.
It is Gigan.
Yeah.
It's not Gigan.
If we went off the English translated title or written, it would be Gigan. But it is Gigan.
Yeah. Also known as Godzilla on Monster Island.
Yeah, what a wild title that is. So, it was released March 12th, 1972, part of the Toho Champion Festival, the spring 1972 edition of it.
Yep.
And we've already talked about the Toho Champion Festival, so we don't have to do that again.
Yeah.
It was shown with Mirror Man Episode 1, Return of Ultraman Episode 2, The Adventurer of Hutch, the Minashigo, Episode 90 and 91, Oak Mook, Episode 1, and Tensai Bakabon, Episode 33.
Yeah. So this film came about sort of, obviously after Hedorah. Tomoyuki Tanaka kind of noticed that Hedorah's box office performance wasn't too great. Meanwhile, Champion Festival reissues of Invasion of the Astro Monster and Ghidorah were shockingly comparable to the brand new Godzilla film, with, I believe, Astro Monster had only a difference in attendance of about 400,000 people.
Yeah, the Ghidorah stuff was actually doing really well.
Yeah. So Tanaka decided it might be best to kind of return Godzilla to how he was back in the 60s and therefore tasked both Kaoru Mabuchi and Shinichi Sekizawa to write different draft scripts for the film that would have to feature the monster King Ghidorah.
Now, it's important to note, so Kaoru Mabuchi previously worked on Godzilla vs. Hedorah and Destroy All Monsters. He also went by the pen name of Takashi Kimura, who worked on Rodan, War of the Gargantuas, Matango. That's probably
various
the
other
best
films.
one. Yeah, Frankenstein versus Baragon, I think he worked on. But his only Godzilla movie technically is Destroy All Monsters. There's people that say that Yoshimitsu Banno rewrote his script for Hedorah, so it's not really his script. And then this was his last time at Toho too. This working on this title. Now, Kaoru Mabuchi's script was titled Godzilla versus the Space Monster.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what he worked on, while Shinichi Sekizawa worked on The Return of King Ghidorah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Both of which would feature some similar elements, such as obviously featuring a monster named Gigan, one of which both featured the Godzilla Tower. Interestingly, Mabuchi's script and a later version of Sekizawa's script would feature the monster Megalon, who
Correct.
obviously was yet to appear by this point.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but Megalon actually initially appeared in one of the drafts for Shinichi Sekizawa's treatment of All Monsters Attack.
Well, if memory serves me right, Gabara was originally imagined as a more like a cockroach or a bug, if I'm remembering right.
I just remember reading that Megalon's first technical appearance.
There is origin in All Monsters Attack there. I remember us covering that specifically.
Which is interesting because it's weird because Megalon, by all accounts, is not what he was in All Monsters Attack in Mabuchi's script. But then the next iteration, which was a Fukuda Sekizawa decision, was also not remotely related to the other previous two attempts at bringing Megalon into, fruition.
Yeah. It's also worth noting that the monster selection for the other drafts were also a bit different outside of just Megalon. So Mabuchi's script was a little closer to the film, with it being primarily a team up between Godzilla and Anguirus. But there was also a being by the name of Marchand, a statue that gets awoken after Gigan uses his buzzsaw against it, which were an alien the alien of the film that's controlling Gigan and King Ghidorah and Megalon wanted to use as a sort of body for itself as well.
Yeah, and so it's important to note that Majin Tool is kind of Toho's version of Daimajin.
Yeah, I guess pretty much.
Which I read through like the synopsis for Mabuchi's script, and it sounds like a lot of fun. There was a whole thing about how Miko, the alien that's controlling Ghidorah, Gigan, and Megalon, would use television for propaganda.
Yeah.
And he specifically wanted to rid the world of traffic accidents and wars, which, I mean, that falls in line with All Monsters Attack, which showcases cars as a bad thing, right? With how many traffic accidents there was. And we also saw something about that in Gamera versus Guiron, where they specifically call out traffic accidents as a problem in Japan.
Yeah.
So it definitely falls in line in terms of that for kind of the metaphors and what the films were tackling at the time. He also wanted to rid the world of war, which falls in line with what we get in the final script, but it was not nearly as heavy-handed as it was in these drafts.
Mm-hmm. It is also worth noting that there is a little bit of conflicting information on when some of these scripts are dated. I've read that, say, Mabuchi's second script, that both these scripts, so their first drafts are dated with the summer of 1971, which I can't confirm whether or not that's entirely true or entirely false. Can't quite confirm that, but there is some sources do claim that the second script for like this Mabuchi script, Godzilla vs. Space Monster, was dated to. Oh wait, no, sorry, I misread the thing. I got confused. Never mind that point. I got mixed up. That's funny.
Now, so you're trying to bring up the date? Is it because correct me if I'm wrong, but Hedorah came out after it was a later year title, right?
Hmm?
When did Hedorah come out again?
Mid 71.
Okay. What do you have the exact month?
July.
So, and see, that's the weird thing is like the quick turnaround on these scripts kind of baffles me.
Yeah. I mean, bear in mind, like some of these, the interesting thing with some of these scripts is like this return of King Ghidorah script by Sekizawa, like the second draft of one of those is dated to October of 71. Bear in mind, the film finished filming around November 2nd of 71.
I could honestly believe that, truth be told.
Mm. Oh,
because
no, I believe it. I believe it. Like I'm looking at the cover of the script, and it is, and I'm looking at both photos, and they are in fact dated to those times.
Now, it's important to note, so the Return of King Ghidorah also featured, it ended up in 3 drafts. The first draft included Godzilla, Rodan, and Varan fighting King Ghidorah, Gigan, and a monster called Mogu. The second had Godzilla, Anguirus, and the Mothra larva fighting King Ghidorah, Gigan, and Megalon. And then the third draft, that's where we got Megalon removed and the Mothra larva and Godzilla and Anguirus fighting King Ghidorah and Gigan.
Yeah.
There's also some reports that Teruyoshi Nakano, the head of the effects department, had some say in the final scripts. In an interview, he said that Toho allowed him power to like talk with the screenwriters and plan stuff and like do all of that, which makes sense. But also, like, if I'm gonna take it that you read through Mabuchi's script.
Yeah.
So I'm just gonna be upfront. Mabuchi's script is way better than what we actually got. Like, it's a legitimately good script. It's filled with so many fresh ideas and interesting concepts. Like that film just enthralls me in just every way. Like it sounds, and from what I can see in my head at least, it looks really good.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I just think, unfortunately, the budget definitely wasn't there for that, I'm afraid, from what it seems, yeah.
Yeah, especially with some of the descriptions, it's like, yeah, how are they supposed to actually pull all this off?
Yeah. I mean, the reason the film doesn't even, like, the reason it's Godzilla, Anguirus, King Ghidorah, and Gigan is, like, they couldn't afford to have to make more than just one new monster suit for the film. Like, they couldn't afford that.
Right, yeah, because they restored Ghidorah a little bit. They kept the Godzilla suit, and then they kept the Anguirus suit from the Straw Monsters.
They restored Godzilla a little bit as well. Like, they had to repaint, like, the dorsal fins and give the whole suit a new coat.
Right. Then they also had to do something to the hand and the eyeball that got messed up.
I think you can still see the hand has some scars. Like, there's still, like, shots where it's, like, the bone hand in the film, if you pay close enough attention.
Right. But then there was the whole thing of like Mogu, Megalon, and Majin Tool. Like they would have had to have constructed new suits for them, and they probably couldn't.
Yes, but Megalon, of course, definitely.
And they probably didn't have the budget to do that. It kind of seems like they had the budget to produce one suit per film until Mechagodzilla.
Yeah. I mean, it's also worth noting that like it's speculated that the reason Rodan also got cut and replaced with Anguirus in Sekizawa's later scripts is because of Toho didn't really have the manpower for Rodan at this time because they didn't really have the manpower to really be operating Ghidorah as well as they used to be able to at this point.
Right.
So another flying monster would just complicate things even more than they already were.
Right. This is the beginning.
And you notice in the film that Ghidorah, he's not looking his best here. I'm going to be honest here.
No.
He's going for a tough time.
This it's funny because this is probably the beginning of what became very popular in the Heisei era of just kind of floating monsters.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, Ghidorah's everything Ghidorah does pretty much in most of the fight is just beam spamming.
Yeah.
That's most of his role. The most physical he gets is either stock footage or when another monster like attacks him.
Yeah. Yeah, they don't really do a lot with any of these characters really in terms of like fleshing them out at all. Now, I believe they also made a water suit for Anguirus, but like it was a lot cheaper.
Did they? I was always under the impression it was the same suit.
I believe so.
It was like just the main Anguirus.
I believe I did read that it was actually a new suit they constructed.
Interesting.
But like the jaw couldn't move. It was like meant to literally.
That actually would make sense then for why the jaw, his mouth is always closed when he roars in water scenes.
Yeah.
That would explain that.
I mean, this film has a lot of ADR problems.
Yeah.
Now, so one last thing here, Ifukube is credited as composer for the film, but all the music in this sans the Godzilla March at the very end was stock music. Ifukube said no to composing the film.
Oh, well, I read that it was a decision by Tanaka just to save a bit of the budget, honestly. That's what I had.
Oh, interesting. This is also, I believe, the first film technically partially produced by Toho Izo, a subdivision.
Yeah.
Now, the first actual...
Well, they did work on Hedera as, like, for art as well.
They were an art department mostly until Megalon. Megalon was the first time they were officially the producers on the film. So we're not going to really talk about Toho Izo until Megalon, but I just felt necessary to bring it up at least.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, do you have anything else you have to say about this 12th Godzilla film, or do we want to dive into the actual film?
I'm surprised we haven't mentioned Red Moon in the slightest.
Yeah, I was looking into Red Moon, which it looks like, so development of that actually started in 1971. It looks like it was
if not earlier?
Yeah.
It almost sounds like it was being potentially a little bit developed in like 70 almost. It sounds like.
I decided, unless you have research and you want to bring it up, I was going to hold off until next episode because that's when it seemed like it really was considered was 73.
Okay. Sure. We can hold off till next time then.
Yeah, because there was no other development of Megalon. Red Moon's the best you got for like a 73 film that's not Megalon. That's because Megalon didn't even get a script. There was no script.
Right. All right, then we'll save that for Megalon then. Tell the whole Red Moon saga then.
So, I mean, that's really all I have in terms of... So, I guess it's important to note, if we're talking timeline here, so we've covered in Daiei films, the 5-company agreement, which fell apart in 1971, which was actors specifically determined to work for this company and this company alone. So once they lost that, a lot of actors went and moved to television. So all of your big name actors are gone, right? So that was hurting the companies. Daiei went bankrupt in 1971, which hurt that company. The Japan Film Export Association ended in 1970, which was funding the films of Shochiku, Nikkatsu, and Daiei. Nikkatsu decided to go into cheap, low-budget Roman porno films, and Shochiku started developing...
Toei was doing a lot of exploitation as well at this time.
Yes, Toei and Toho were the only two companies not directly impacted by the Japan Film Export Association. However, they still definitely felt the impact of the 5-company agreement and the loss of Daiei, the change of Nikkatsu, and the change of Shochiku, who went and started developing more theatrical plays, kabuki plays. And Toei also really started focusing on television. So the Japanese film industry by 1972 was in a horrible spot. Horrible. And we see this, Godzilla vs. Gigan, is the beginning of that. Truly the beginning of that. Hedorah technically was, but it was like they worked on it just as it started. So it had that kind of buffer between being in that and not being in that, which benefited it greatly.
It is honestly kind of amazing how I wouldn't say how not impacted by it Hedorah was, but how far less obvious the state of the industry was in Hedorah compared to this film.
Now, it's also important to note, and we didn't talk about this during Hedorah, so I wanted to bring it up now. So in the West, there's the Heisei era, or the Showa era, the Heisei era, Millennium, Reiwa, right? And then if you want to get technical, it's Showa, Heisei, Reiwa, and whatnot. If we're talking periods and how to separate all the films, right? Now, in Japan, the Showa era is actually split up into two different time periods. The monster boom, which was it like 1962 to 1967?
Around that,
something like that.
Because there's several monster booms. This film was in the second.
Yes,
monster boom.
Second monster boom, which was 1971 to 1974. Godzilla vs. Hedorah was an early film in that. Now, the interesting thing, and I think this is why Kamen Rider and Sentai and whatnot and Ultraman get looped into the kaiju stuff, because they consider the second monster boom primarily henshin heroes. It was sometimes called the transformation boom because, I mean, most of the content being produced at this time was superheroes on television.
Right.
Kamen Rider reached its height in this era in 1972, so that would be Kamen Rider 71's conclusion and Kamen Rider 73. Now, interestingly enough, part of it too came from the influences of the sports spirit boom, which was a manga boom of 1965 to 1971. That is reportedly what. So like last month we talked about the yokai boom of the 1968 to like 1970. Yeah. So during the time frame of the yokai boom, there was also the sports spirit boom, and those two booms, like influxes of manga, anime, and films, influenced and kind of pulled the monster boom out of the limelight. Which is why when the second monster boom started, they started taking influences from those. I mean, look at Kamen Rider. A lot of the creatures in that could be yokai. Look at the whole thing about Kamen Rider is people practicing and working hard to win and be victorious. I mean, look at Ultraman. Ultraman Leo, 1973, is all about the host of Ultraman working hard and training to become the best Ultra he could possibly be. All of that is directly influenced from this sports spirit boom. And we even see that in Godzilla. He has to fight, he has to practice himself to become what he needs to win.
Mm. I mean, yeah, there is really that moment near the end of this film during the climactic fight. Yeah.
And so that stuff is all very important to this film. Now, Godzilla vs. Hedorah also does have some moments. I mean, Godzilla literally does the Specium beam pose at one point.
Yeah.
But all of that, I mean, that was, again, Hedorah is almost like the proto second Monster Boom Godzilla movie for all of this, right?
Yeah.
Gigan, however, very much is influenced by that.
Right.
And one of the interesting things in the scripts that Mabuchi and Sekizawa did was they dove into that a little bit more, exploring the commercialization of monsters. I mean, in the film, we see like Godzilla Tower, which is they're commercializing Godzilla into an attraction. And by 1972, the popular thing was to create toys off this stuff. It's no secret to anybody. Toei's big thing is toys. Bandai, who works directly with Toei and Tsuburaya, they have to sell toys. That's how these... I mean, as another Godzilla example, Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah in 1991 flopped. The only reason that it was deemed successful is it had great toy sales. This is the turning point in the Godzilla franchise where toys became the important part of the film. And it shows so badly. It's not like Godzilla vs. Hedorah where they quite literally showcase the toys like the Marusan Sofubi and whatnot.
Uh-huh.
But it's still there, right?
Mm-hmm.
And in a weird roundabout way, it kind of reminds me of like 1980s American cartoons. Honestly, that might be the best way I can describe Godzilla vs. Gigan to a fan.
I mean, it is not exactly uncommon for people to compare this movie to like a Saturday morning cartoon, just in the writing and how it's structured. I've seen comparisons to like Scooby-Doo and stuff like that for this. Which honestly, yeah, I can kind of see.
I could see the Scooby-Doo. I feel like this means we should probably dive into the film, shouldn't we?
I agree.
Now, one last thing. The script title, before it was changed to Godzilla vs. Gigan, was Earth Destruction Directive Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah. So this was supposed to be a King Ghidorah film initially with Gigan showing up.
Right. And the title wasn't changed until after filming was completed.
Yeah. So I guess we can go ahead and dive in here to the film. I mean, we start off with Godzilla right away, which was a request from Tanaka. They wanted, I mean, it's children, right? Children wanted Godzilla on screen, so that's why they included him right away.
Yeah, and that was a stipulation early on from Tanaka, if I remember right, alongside like having King Ghidorah in the film. Mm-hmm. They also wanted as much monster screen time as you can stuff into this, pretty much, to keep the kids' attention.
Right. It's also important to note,
which you can tell in certain scenes,
right,
that they exist solely to have monster screen time.
Right, and this isn't the only one because, as an example, Terror of Mechagodzilla starts with stock footage from Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla. Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla starts off with footage of Anguirus. Godzilla vs. Megalon, if I remember correctly, starts off with Monster Island exploding, and you get Ghidorah, you get Godzilla, you get Rodan, you get Anguirus.
Yeah.
So this, and obviously Godzilla shows up here. I don't believe Godzilla or Hedorah appear in Hedorah initially. And again, that's another weird...
Well, Hedorah shows up pretty quickly, but yeah. Sure, Godzilla takes its time.
Well, I guess then, because, Anguirus shows up, not Godzilla, in the first few minutes of Mechagodzilla. But my point is, because in Hedorah is... I guess, yeah, well, Hedorah doesn't show up in the first scene.
Sure.
It doesn't open with Godzilla. Or another monster. Whereas here it does, I know Mechagodzilla does, Terror does, and I think Megalon does. I'm
pretty sure that island scene is the first scene. If not, it's the second
It's
one.
It starts off with an image of a map, and they talk about like it's narration, and then it's like they felt it over on Monster Island where nuclear testing caused the island to explode and all the monsters ran in terror. And then it's Godzilla and Anguirus and Rodan.
That's basically the first scene.
So this is, again, it's weird because Hedorah is not connected in that tissue, right? And once Hedorah does pop up for that first like shocker moment, it takes a little while. It's a slow burner film. And
I don't know if I'd call Hedorah a slow burn film, honestly. I feel like it's actually pretty tightly paced.
Well, it's slow burner in terms of showcasing the monsters. I know it's slow enough that people talk about how they don't care about the humans at all. And so it's difficult to be attentive to those characters while the monsters aren't there. Because Godzilla doesn't show up until about 25% of the way through the film, if I remember correctly.
I mean, yeah, but that's about like what, the 20-25 minute mark at most?
Yeah.
Like, that's not that
But
long.
in like all these other films, he shows up within 5 minutes. Like
sure, but then you don't see him again until about the 20-minute mark.
Right, but at least in the following films, he does show up within the first like 2 minutes.
I guess. I don't know. I feel like all those. I feel like a lot of the time complaints like, monster doesn't show up in the first 20 minutes. What the hell? I feel.
Well,
like
I'm not complaining
like
there. I'm just
whatever.
pointing out how Hedorah is different from the rest of these. It's very obvious Tanaka A wasn't present, B didn't have his requirements, and C was just being more experimental.
Okay, sure.
Like
sure.
That's at the end of the day. That's
sure.
what I'm trying to point out here. Is just
sure. Yeah.
Even though Hedorah is the first Godzilla film and the second monster boom, it does not feel like that.
Sure. Yeah.
And it's funny because a lot of people compare Hedorah to 54 in terms of kind of like what it's trying to do. And it kind of works in the same sense of like Hedorah doesn't feel like the rest of the 70s Godzilla films. I think the one thing you can point out is, it does have a song in it. Because by this point, it was popular to have a music number in your superhero monster movies. And you have Give Back the Sun or Save the Earth. And that is... and that is the song for Hedorah. This film has the Godzilla March. Megalon has Jet Jaguar, Godzilla Punch Punch Punch. Mechagodzilla has the King Caesar song. Terror has none, but that's because Terror is a depressed child. I say that, and that's not a negative thing at all. Anybody who knows me knows that is not a negative thing. I love that.
Mm-hmm. Right, yeah, that's a new description I've never heard for that film.
The Terror of Mechagodzilla is the depressed stepchild of the 1970s Godzilla movies.
Right.
Hedorah's the flamboyant one. Gigan and Megalon are the twins. And Mechagodzilla is the middle child. That's the family tree of the 70s Godzilla films, everybody.
Yeah. Going back to the film after our opening credits.
Which are actually really cool.
Nice. Yeah, I love... I mean, the Ifukube track that, if I remember right, was from the
Last War?
Osaka Expo.
Yes.
That, I love that track. I associate it with this film because I've never, I wasn't exactly there for the Osaka export, but it's an awesome track, and I like the titles where it's like these laser beams with it's like a Gigan sound effect. I don't know.
Yeah,
it's not really Gigan sound effect, but it's what I associate with him.
Right.
You know what I mean?
And honestly, the animation here is way better. Like this, honestly, might be the best credits for a Godzilla
these
film.
are some of the best. Yeah, 100%, honestly.
Which until this watch, I had not seen the Japanese the Japanese credits, and so I was like, "Whoa, this is actually really well done. Like they're animated well, they look well. Like it's genuinely good."
I mean, I don't remember what the American credits look like.
I think
is it just boring text or?
Yeah, I think that it was boring text that just kind of popped up.
Oh, that's really boring. Which is a shame because the one here is actually really unique for the franchise.
I was genuinely impressed by it. Following this, though, we do jump into some manga panels with some narration. Probably because by this point, manga had grown to be very popular. Like I said, the Sports Spirit wave was mostly manga, to be honest. And then we are in this publisher's office. Now, if you look in the back, it's a lot of Weekly Shonen Sunday covers. I went and I found and I figured out which manga magazines these were, which these were young men magazines. Following 1970, they started publishing various stories such as I Am Right Angel, Drifting Classroom, Judo Sanka, Let's Go Gun, Dame Oyaja, Zen Giba, and Otoko do All Koshin. Now, I believe they eventually did some of the Tokusatsu adaptations.
Would make sense.
But I do think it's important to note that
I mean, some of the ones behind like the publisher is like straight up just Ultraman. Like you can see Red King in the background.
Yeah, there's some Ultraman that kind of show up throughout this. I think it's important to note, like, this is our first, like, they are really going hard and heavy on the manga and the anime or the superhero influences in this film. And I think that's important to note, especially so, like, with the Shonen Sunday magazines in the background. That's young men magazines, that's young boys. So that's going to be the primary target. So, like, right away they wanted to get them engaged and like, oh, I know what I'm looking at. That's what I'm seeing.
Yeah.
Which, you know, it's very obvious they're wearing what they're wanting on their sleeves. But something that's said right away in this opening sequence, I think is very interesting, because they're talking about, is it Shukra, the monster of homework?
Yeah, the homework monster, yeah.
So Shukra and Mamagon are two original kaiju created by our main character, Gengo, correct? And so the reason he's created them is because his publisher said that he wanted him to take what the children were afraid of and create a monster from that. And the publisher says a quote that I think is very interesting, because in a way it almost feels like it's a slap at Toho, and it's too simplistic. Running polls and seeing what the audiences wanted. Kids today are more sophisticated. I think that line is very interesting because we know that Toho ran polls. Like, that's how they determine. What
version of the film did you watch that had the ran polls line in it?
The Criterion version. The Criterion subs.
Oh, no, I didn't watch them. I couldn't watch them because I don't have a player that plays that at the moment. So I had to
actually no. It was
DVD.
The quote actually is, in your survey, kids all said they hated homework most, right?
Oh, okay.
So they're talking about surveys, polls, right? And
okay, yeah.
I couldn't help but think, like, that's how Toho determined so much of their films. So in a way, it's almost like I felt like that line was supposed to be a little meta of like, yeah, Toho, you're making these films based off of what people are saying they want, and that's not really what you should be doing.
Mm-hmm.
That was an interesting approach, I thought, I mean, that's literally our first conversation we get, is them calling out, essentially making rubbish based off of polls, and that these things should be more sophisticated. And it's funny because Gigan, Godzilla vs. Gigan, was supposed to be way more sophisticated in its scripts. Both Karu Mabuchi and Shinichi Sekizawa's scripts were way more detailed before the budget cuts, the filming constraints, and what Tanaka required.
I mean, bear in mind also at this time they were also trying to simplify the stories as well with this film in particular, to make sure that it was more appealing and easier to follow for the kids. Right,
yeah, because these were made for afternoon matinee kids showings. This was supposed to be shown next to TV shows, TV episodes. Yeah. So, yeah, like, by all accounts, I truly believe that this element of the film is kind of being very meta and calling out the film for and what it ended up being, which is not very sophisticated by any means.
Very simple film, you could say, perhaps.
Yeah, exactly.
Which, I mean, I guess, in trying to do what it's set out to do, I guess in that regard it's successful, but beyond that, not particularly, doesn't particularly do much beyond that, I suppose you could say.
Right. I'm really showing my opinions really early on, aren't I?
A little, yes.
Mm.
But yeah, unfortunately for Gengo, his idea is rejected by the publisher. And so his girlfriend gets him a meeting with another potential job avenue.
Yeah, the World Children's Land, which is a theme park.
Theme park with a giant Godzilla tower.
Which I wondered if this was influenced by Expo 70 whatsoever, just because, I mean, that was a recent event with like a theme park-esque look.
Oh, maybe that'd be interesting.
But the idea about the theme park is that it will teach children about peace, and that's it.
Yeah.
There's a lot of like really undercooked statements in this film.
Oh, the last lines from some of their characters is just like some of the most, just like, it's trying to say something, but the theme it's going for is just not fully formed at all.
Oh my god, there's like, I feel like there's like 5 half-formed themes in this movie.
Yeah, like you've got these ideas of the commodification of the kaiju and like merchandise, and the Godzilla tower is like this ultimate sort of extension of that idea. You've got like
they
warnings against science.
Yeah, because they straight up say, man, we're really like, we depend so much on science, and look, our car got destroyed, but we have 2 feet, so we can walk our ways out of this. It's like, okay, like that's such an awkward, and it's honestly a really jarring standpoint, because prior to this film, all the Godzilla films are really based in like scientific facts, right?
Well, the thing is, I mean, look, warning against the dangers of science isn't exactly anything new for Godzilla. I mean, 54, you can make that argument with being a warning against science gone too far.
That's true.
The issue here is just the idea is just completely not fully formed, and the way it's communicated, at least in these subtitles, I imagine the Criterion subtitles are similar to the ones I watched in that regard, because I remember last time I watched it with those, I had the same issue where when the film tries to explain its theme at the end with that, it's almost confusing, because it just doesn't. It's kind of there in the film, but it's never fully formed. So it just almost feels like it's an out of nowhere line of dialogue, even though it really isn't entirely.
It's just like in Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla 2, where that one American lady says, yeah, artificial life, not like straight up is like, whenever it's natural life versus artificial life, it's like, okay, lady, who are you? Why are you coming out and telling us like the meaning of this movie?
Yeah.
Which, I mean, the film struggles to tell you that, but that's more of a narrative and editing issue, because she was actually like a more important character at one point.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that film's chopped down a fair bit, so
yeah. But I really believe that that's a lot of the issue here as well, is this film feels like it's chopped. Like this movie feels like it's a vignette of a larger script.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. You can tell there were more bigger, more formed ideas in earlier versions of the script, even if you haven't read like Mabuchi or Sekizawa's like stories. Like, you can kind of tell.
Yeah, and it kind of sucks because it's so obvious. Like there's some examples where it's like, okay, maybe this is just a really undercooked script, it's fine. But like this film straight up, like you can just tell that there are so many elements that are just omitted from this story. Like whatever whatever got cut, like it just got cut. They didn't like try to rewrite it. They didn't try to like skip it. It's just gone. Whatever it was.
Yeah. And it's unfortunate because I actually think there is a portion of this film that's actually pretty alright. It's not great, but there's I think the first act or so of the film is fairly smooth cruising, pretty fairly engaging. Could use for more and could do for more in the character department, but at least every character is distinct enough that I can remember. I remember which one is which pretty clearly, and I remember at least one thing about them.
I think you and I are going to agree and disagree heavily throughout this discussion.
Okay. I see. Interesting.
But before we get too far ahead, because I think that that's going to be a thing we're going to talk about frequently, we do get introduced to Kubota, the main person.
He's the second in command of the.
But he's our main Children's Land person. Because the chairman doesn't really do a whole lot.
I guess so, yeah.
And we get the whole peace. And see, the peace thing, the idea of peace is a whole nother, essentially it's to stop war, right?
Yeah.
And that, it comes across more as an annoying, okay, these people don't know what they're doing. They're just saying they want peace, right? It's really clunky how they include it in this film.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, no, it's... The dialogue for it is very weird. I do imagine the idea with the dialogue is so that it's trying to make it obvious for children that, yeah, these are the bad guys. I think the intent is to very clearly communicate that from the first scene. So in that regard, it does work. But, yeah, no, it just ends off kind of coming off rather clunky.
Yeah. And then there's also the whole thing in... Okay, I'm going to be honest. I do like the concept of Shukra and Mamagon. I think that's really funny.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't understand why they include it so much in this film. It kind of gets obnoxious. When I was watching
just for a couple gags.
I don't know. I just was kind of okay, cool. And the way, I don't know. It's just, there was something about it. I was just annoyed at it. Maybe I was in a grouchy mood when I watched
you were
this
in
film.
a grouchy mood, man.
I was just okay, quit talking about it. I don't care. It's irrelevant. Speaking of irrelevant, we get stock footage during all of this.
Yeah. We talk about Monster Island, so we get some DAM footage, of course.
We get Rodan, Kamakris, Kumonga,
Mothra,
Gorosaurus.
And this time her cameo in the film's not accidental.
Right, even though I think there's a slip of her showing up in stock footage from Ghidorah later on.
That's what I was referring to, yes.
Oh, yeah. Now, they also use footage from Son of Godzilla in this sequence.
Yeah.
And King Kong Escapes, right? For Gorosaurus?
Probably, yeah. Might have been. I think that was DAM footage, actually.
Now that I'm thinking about it, yeah, you're right. It was the Straw Monsters footage. And then they showcase Manila. Yeah, they showcase Manila, which is footage from Son of Godzilla. And that's something we get a lot of in this film, is the stock footage. But it's only 8 minutes. I will say that. This film, it's only 8 minutes of the hour and 29-minute runtime. So it's not even a significant amount of the film. It's just a small portion.
Yeah, it's not quite as bad as some of the Showa Gamera films get with the stock footage, but it is. I do think a lot of the monster scenes in this kind of have a pacing issue of going too long, and I think the stock footage is a big contributor in that.
Yes, I agree. I agree wholeheartedly with that.
This film would work better with a 70-minute runtime, which if you move the stock footage, it pretty much would be that.
Yeah, exactly. Because it's 90 minutes now, 8 minutes of stock footage. It would be about 80, and then I think you could You could probably end up cutting out something.
I think you could speed up the final battle, honestly.
Yeah. Especially since
I think even like the new footage for it goes on a bit long.
I agree.
And a lot of it's quite a bit like it's a bit too slow.
I agree. There's like 3 times where Godzilla gets knocked down. It's like, okay.
It doesn't help that the editing in the at some points in the final fight is really bad.
It's so jumpy. It's so jumpy. And that's because they're trying to like blend in all the stock footage they're using with the new footage, and it just gets really clunky.
God, even before they start using the stock footage for the climax, like the start of the final fight is really bad.
Yeah.
And there's no stock footage in that part.
Speaking of really bad, we get a joke from Gengo. That's a really bad joke because I'm surprised he didn't get beat up.
What, the Mamagon joke? Or?
Yeah. So after we cut back from the children's land, we go to Gengo's apartment, which looks really cool. Like, it looks like a great studio apartment. One thing I must say, the sets in this film for like Children's Land HQ and the Godzilla Tower and his apartment, which I think are the 3 main sets in the film, are really well designed.
Oh, yeah, the Godzilla Tower. The Godzilla Tower is really cool, and it's like I genuinely wondered up until I saw like behind the scenes photos. I was like, how much of this did they actually build? Because it, like, with how it's shot, it almost looks like it almost convinces you that wow, they might have built just the whole Godzilla Tower. Obviously, they didn't, but the way the film actually shoots it is pretty convincing in selling that effect that there is this actual Godzilla Tower.
Yeah, no, you're 100% right there. It's kind of wild how well there's some genuinely good camera work in this. Like, there's some good stuff. There's even at a couple points there's a free roaming crane camera in the final fight that looks good. But they cut it right before it would be a great money shot, probably because they don't have enough set to like keep going. But there's actually some really well done camera usage in this film. However, it is few and far between for those sequences, in my opinion. Yeah.
I mean, the human drama, I think, actually is pretty solid in how it's shot, like more consistently than the monster stuff.
Yeah, especially like in Gengo's apartment where like everything's detailed, and it does a great job.
Even outside of the apartment and like in some of the other scenes, just like the use of like mirrors in particular is really. There's a lot of just little moments of really fun little direction and camera work.
Yeah, and they do a great job at foreground and background.
Right, exactly.
It genuinely is a decent, like, there's some really good like depth shots too.
Yes, exactly.
It's really well done. I gotta give them that the human drama's shot probably better than Hedra. I would say it's probably shot better than Hedra.
I don't know. I think both are well shot generally.
The cinematographer they had, I don't know his name, but he was actually a pretty good cinematographer. Maybe a little bit better than the one that Honda typically picked. But Honda also just really liked, like, the beauty about this cinematographer, he does long shots. And not like wide shots, but like long standing. Like, they don't cut a lot. It's usually a camera that will linger and follow. And I think that works out really nicely. And anytime it does cut, it's to another visually interesting angle. And it's better than I prefer that over fixed camera angles, which is what Honda did a lot. Honda did a lot of fixed camera angles. Sometimes they would be visually interesting. Sometimes they would just be kind of simplistic. And so I think that's one thing that the 70s films do have, is they were very creative and very well thought in terms of the drama sequences and how they were shot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, generally, a lot of the Showa Godzilla films in general have just really solid, like, drama unit cinematography generally.
Right, yeah, and I think a lot of that comes down to I really do believe that like the 60s and 70s stuff is probably like the best point in the Godzilla franchise for having that artistic direction, because that was also really popular to have that cinematography that was that well done, right?
Yeah.
And now like by the 80s and 90s it was a little more, they were trying to emulate Hollywood a little bit more, which a lot of Hollywood stuff unfortunately is basic cinematography, nothing crazy, nothing developed, I will say. And so once you get into that Heisei Millennium, it is, I mean, it's Yamazaki as well. I mean, it's adequate. It's not like amazing cinematography. It's not interesting cinematography. It's not Hideaki Anno cinematography. And that's one thing like I'll give Anno, is he does a great job at those interesting angles, and I guarantee you that's because he loves specifically Akio Jisoji.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, 100%. Like a lot of Anno's, in particular, a lot of his biggest influences probably Jisoji and a lot of manga artists as well. And
I think that Jisoji look, I mean, that's
and American or British TV shows as well. Because there's one that like Evangelion I know takes a bit from as well. I forget what it's called.
Doctor Who.
Not that one. Another show.
You mean there's more than Doctor Who from Britain?
Shockingly, yes.
Wow. I learned something new today.
Yeah, we all do. Yeah, going back into the film, where were we? We were at Mamagon.
Yes, Mamagon, and we get the little joke with Mamagon being designed after his girlfriend, which should have earned him a slap. I'm kind of surprised it didn't.
Yeah. Eventually, we next see him going to work to meet up with the Kubota, but while he's on his way, he ends up encountering a mysterious girl that runs into him, dropping a tape of sorts.
Right, and then Kubota and his guys run after the girl, and he goes inside to meet the chairman, which, again, another beautiful set. Very well done. It's very weird. I love weird sets.
Speaking of weird, Gengo never does a great job at not making himself seem really suspicious this entire movie.
Oh my god. Yes.
Like, they play up the cartoonishness a little too much with him, I feel.
I also do wonder if it's just acting, because he wasn't a very established actor.
Maybe.
Part of me wonders if it was a little bit of just he sucks at acting.
Maybe. I don't know. I feel like some of it is also just some of it might be the performance itself. I'm not going to disagree there, but some of it I also think is just what they're having him do in these scenes as well. That just makes him stupid.
Well, kind of like
the idea is for him to be not the brightest.
Right. Well, there's also the whole thing. So like, and this isn't just Gengo either. There's another character, the brother character who shows up later on. They'll have like moments where like the aliens will talk to each other, and they'll just be like, "They're spoiling our plans. The tape. Oh, the tape. Oh, the monsters." And then our human characters are like, "What tape? What monsters?" It's like something happens and they're like, "What's that over there? Guys, what is that over there?" It's like, don't do that. That's boring and that's lame, and that's like, give your characters better dialogue than, "What are you talking about? What do you mean tape? What do you mean industrial spy? What do you mean monsters?" It's like, oh god. Why does the characters in the film have to be stupid? And then they talk about peace again. I'm so much peace.
Of course. We need to stop the enemy of peace.
Peace, love, and rock and roll. Sorry, that's hetero, sorry.
Yeah. After his little talk with the chairman and Kubota, where he first hears of the M-Space Hunter Nebula from them. On his way home, he ends up encountering the girl that ran away previously, and everyone's favorite character from this film, Corn Hippie.
The Corn Hippie. Yes, the Corn Hippie. Now, okay, here's the thing. This film has, I think, and I'm just going to be upfront now, and I'm just going to say it, I think this film has some of the worst human characters we have seen in a Godzilla film yet.
Really?
Out of the ones we've covered.
What do you think makes them some of the worst?
None of them, like, the only drive is one of them wants to get their brother back. The others don't really have a drive to be there.
I will agree that character initiative is kind of one issue I take with the film, particularly in the last act, where I feel like they get a little bit to do, but there is a little bit too much of a stretch of them not really having much agency for me.
Right, and it's like they literally go to the one place that, like, the self-defense force is set up, apparently, and they get them to agree to blow up the tower. And then they go and do that, and then they move on. It's really weird. So, like, Corn Hippie has no reason to be there. Like, he has no, we don't get established relations, we don't get anything, right? Our main female character, she's looking for her brother, right? And Gengo gets a job at Children's Land, so that's his reason for, that's his relation to her. But he has no business exploring further, right? I mean, he ends up doing that when you can limit yourself and kind of, work that in. But the problem is he's such a stupid character. It's hard to believe that he could properly do that, right? He is a Shaggy-like character that messes up all the time and just so happens to mess up properly and to get everything to happen the way it does. And then you have his girlfriend who is literally just there to be the strong woman character. Yes. And, on one hand, great. But on the other, it's like, okay, there's previous Godzilla films that do strong, independent women way better. And like they control the whatever scene they're in. They're the ones that control that power. Here, none of these actors, I think, really hold that status. They all kind of feel like bumbling teenagers. And I think that it hurts the film because it's hard to be connected to characters that feel kind of awkward and clumsy throughout the entirety of their film.
I don't know. I don't entirely agree with that. I don't know, but I don't think these are some of the outright the worst in the franchise. I think even in the films that we've covered, that like films like Hedorah have a lot of just complete nothing burger cast members. Like, yeah, they have kind of a reason to be there. Mm-hmm. Feels like their family got family ties and whatnot in Hedorah, but really that you could remove them from the script and not much would change. I mean, look, Corn Hippie maybe you could remove here, but do you want to remove Corn Hippie?
I will say this, like, they literally kill one of the main characters in Hedorah and nobody ever talks about that.
Yeah, exactly. It's probably the funniest thing in the movie.
I won't say that. Okay, maybe I'll say that, like, Godzilla Kong the New Empire has worse characters in this movie.
I'll actually disagree.
But it's definitely some of the worst. I never once was intrigued in what they were doing.
I would say Dan Stevens does kind of. I don't know if he solos Corn Hippie, but he does solo.
It's because he's zesty.
No, he's just funny. Which just happens to be because he's zesty. I mean, what?
Also, we should establish the reason we're calling him Corn Hippie is he mimics a gun with his corn on the cob that he then
Yeah.
eats. The Gengo passes out. And then
Anyone who knows this movie knows this character.
Yeah. And then oddly enough, they know how to take him back to his apartment.
Yeah, that is kind of
did you
funny.
notice that?
I did notice that. Yeah, I did find that mildly
I was
funny.
like, how did they know to take him back to his apartment? That doesn't make sense.
I mean, they were like waiting. They did like Tomoko appeared like just outside of his house. To be fair,
Okay, but he also lives in an apartment. So how did they know which apartment?
see, that is a good question.
Yeah. And then they do their introductions. They, it's the reveal. Oh, Children's Land's actually the bad guys here, and and they're like, "Where's the tape?" And he's like, "Oh, I left it in a train locker." And so then they go to the. We cut back and we get our introduction to the brother, because this is where we're established to the problem, which is her brother is missing. He was last seen in the Godzilla Tower. The Children's Land people are the villains. I need your help finding them, right?
Yeah, and as we're introduced to him, who's being held captive by the spoiler alert aliens. Suddenly, characters start playing their action tape too.
Right, which is we never really get it's weird because the tape awakens the Monster Island monsters, right? It awakens Godzilla and Anguirus.
It is explained a bit that like even though humans can't understand it, it's like the monsters understand what it means. It's like it's the devices that they're using to like control King Ghidorah and Gigan, and I guess send orders to them, essentially, more or less.
But see, if they know that that's going to awaken the Monster Island monsters, it feels a little weird, right? Because like, why would they have a tape that does that? I
mean, they do mention in their plan that Godzilla appearing is part of their plan for some reason.
Oh, that's true. For some reason. It doesn't. They probably,
if I remember right, it's so that they can kill him.
Well, it's still lame. Godzilla and Anguirus wake up. They have their conversation with speech bubbles in the Japanese version. In the English version, it's just dialogue.
Yeah, probably the best scene in the movie.
Yeah, and the speech bubbles, again, another manga thing, right? It's another homage to manga.
Yeah.
Which is funny. And then after that, we go and we watch Gengo back at the base,
trying to
at
sneak
Godzilla
in
Tower,
and find the brother Shima, and just being an absolute buffoon in doing so.
Yeah, I really don't understand how he didn't get cut earlier.
Well, the alien figures it out like pretty quickly. He just gives him cigarettes to give them the location.
Right. But after this weird interaction, I mean, he does find his lighter. He takes it back. They talk about it. And then this is another weird moment in the film. So it's a jarring transition into a subplot that felt really kind of forced. Did you get that vibe from this whole interaction too?
What? Them going to find like information on like the Kubota and the chairman?
Right, because it's like they're talking about Takashi Shima, the brother, and then Corn Hippie's like, "Well, wait a minute. If we're conducting a case, we need to first do a background check on these people." It's like, where did this come from? What are we talking about? Like, it just felt really forced. It's it just felt clunky. It's a clunky piece of story to me.
I don't know. I think this is generally fine because it's like there's like for the entire film there's this weirdness to Kubota and the chairman and World Peace Land and that they've constantly brought up, and so now they're finally like exploring, okay, what is this actually all about? What is up with these two weirdos? So I think it's like a natural progression to this sort of investigation that they're doing.
Oh, and by the way, while they're doing this, Anguirus is coming to Japan.
Yeah.
So we get a small montage of our main characters doing all that exploring, and then they go to Yamano. And this is where we get the reveal of like the chairman and Kubota are like dead.
Yeah. They were student and teacher who went on like a hiking trip together and mysteriously died.
Also, the priest, his ADR here sucks. It's awful. It's atrocious. Which, okay, I will say this. The idea that the aliens are taking dead bodies is really cool. But they don't explore it much further. It's a cool idea. I would love to see that explored upon.
I think the film touches upon it as much as it really needs to. Honestly, I think it works and it's interesting.
I don't know. I feel like in you could do it better in a different story.
I guess, sure.
I see potential in it. I see potential in it, and it's okay here. I just wish we could see something else with it, something a little bit better. And then we, talking about the aliens and whatnot, we do cut back to them where we once again see a human character overhear them talking about plans, and he's like, "What are you talking about?" And then he like gets beat up.
Yeah.
This film's very repetitive.
Meanwhile, we cut back to Anguirus, who emerges at the Sagami Bay.
For no reason. I get it. Godzilla said you better check. He literally shows up, gets fired at, walks away.
Yeah.
There is no reason for him to be here.
It might just be an excuse to have a monster scene.
Yeah, they end up using footage from War of the Gargantuas and Mothra vs. Godzilla in this scene.
Yeah, it's a very pointless scene.
Literally, it has no reason to be here.
It's also boring, and the Anguirus suit does not look... It's not looking its best in this scene.
This is the water suit, I believe.
Yeah, it doesn't look too great.
Yeah, no. It's bad. Isn't there footage from Invasion of Astro Monster here too? Or am I thinking about the final battle?
Probably. That might be. I think there is a little bit with like some of the tanks approaching and stuff.
Yeah. And yeah, I remember thinking like, what's the point of this scene? It has no reason.
Yeah. Also, some of the cinematography is not the greatest. Like, I don't know, the scale's a bit off when some shots just make it... some shots just end up making the Mesa tanks look bigger than Anguirus.
Yes. Yeah, it's definitely... It's the depth of field perception.
Yeah,
Yeah, it looks really wonky. This film... This and Hedorah, I think, both suffer from making the monsters look smaller than they should be.
Yeah. I mean, there's a pretty infamous shot later on with Ghidorah and Gigan and the Godzilla Tower.
Right, where they circle it and they look...
The models are smaller, even though Ghidorah's canonically bigger.
Right.
I mean, even Gigan's meant to be bigger than the tower.
Yeah. So it's stuff like that it's really obnoxious. And maybe to me part of the issue, so we're about 30 minutes in, so we're about a third of the way through the film.
Mm-hmm.
My problem is like up to this point, it's been a lot of back and forth of nothingness. We only started really moving the plot in an interesting light like 10 minutes prior. That's whenever they introduced the Takashi Shima conundrum, right? And we're watching that unfold. And that has opened up more stuff. So it took them 20 minutes to grab and find a plot point that was actually interesting. And then it becomes this clunky problem for the next like 25 minutes.
I don't know. I generally think this first act, minus the bit with Anguirus, like this first act generally works and like getting you intrigued and like what's up with these world peace guys, what's up with brother, these two guys are dead? What are these guys then? Yeah,
there is some mystery set up. I will give you that. They do set up some mystery. But I don't know.
I think that I feel like this is the point where the movie's at its most interesting as well. Like after this point, it slowly kind of just starts to become less and less interesting.
Yeah, because I mean they get with the brother semi quickly. I think he doesn't really become important until like the final third of the film. But the mystery of where's my brother, who are these two people, and what's going on with this tape is probably the most interesting part of the film. I will agree with you there.
Yeah.
Also, just saying accepting the cigarettes was a stupid idea.
Yeah, definitely.
Like, I just, he's so stupid. It annoys me.
In some regards, his Gengo's stupidity does kind of make him charming. The problem is that's kind of just all there is to him.
Right. He's very basic character.
Mm-hmm. It's just one trait. Sorry, one of two traits. The other is that he's a manga artist.
Manga artist in air quotes. He's a starving artist is what he is.
That's most manga artists, frankly. Starving, overworked artist.
That's funny.
It's sadly true, though.
Rest in peace, every starving artist in the world. Which is all
of them?
F in the chat.
But yeah, after finding the brother and reporting back to his team, the aliens end up showing up. But then they just run off as soon as a couple of them get beaten up a little. Which is very funny.
Yeah. And then they go and like try to tell people to investigate Godzilla Tower, which I feel like if you just reported a missing persons case, that would work enough. But they just kind of shrug it off, and then they're like, oh no, the monsters on Monster Island are about to break loose. It's like perfect timing. And then Godzilla and Anguirus are swimming for the next 10 minutes.
Yeah.
I think I might be.
It was nice of Godzilla to actually do something this time.
Yeah.
Not just leave it to Anguirus.
And see, that's the point. Is like, why does Anguirus swim up, get shot at, swim back, get Godzilla to swim back? It just doesn't make sense. It doesn't make any sense.
But as the monsters leave, the aliens set off their, having gotten back their both action tapes. They declare that the chairman declares a speech about how much they've been waiting for this day, and they will move on to the next phase of their plan.
And then out from two crystals comes King Ghidorah and Gigan.
Yes.
I love the Gigan reveal, by the way. I think the Gigan reveal is really fun.
Oh, it's really cool. It's really cool. It is a little soured by the not too great looking models. But the actual explosion, like Ghidorah's reveal and like the crystal itself for Gigan is actually really cool.
I agree wholeheartedly. And then it's all four monsters are converging to Japan. We get shots of the 67 Godzilla suit in the water. We get Anguirus swimming, Gigan and Ghidorah flying around. Our main characters plot to save the brother,
but get captured.
Yeah, they get captured and then they get stuck with the brother, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, and this is where the aliens essentially just tell the characters everything.
Right, and it's like, why would you do that? Like, this is just basic, like, reveals of aliens. And then we get another shoe-in of a metaphor that doesn't work. Because they've been talking about peace this whole time. And then they're like, pollution. So, at the beginning they established the kind of the meta thing with the whole, like, don't be too simplistic. You have to be sophisticated to make good art. Okay, I get it. You can't really make that the whole plot, but you could easily bring that back throughout somehow.
Mm-hmm.
Especially since Shukra and Mamagon are relevant characters for most of the film. Then you get the whole what was the one after that? There's a hint of an idea after that, and now we're getting the pollution metaphors, which go listen to the Godzilla vs. Hedorah episode. We cover all the pollution stuff.
The pollution angle can kind of fit. Like it it relates well enough to like the science gone amok idea that was kind of somewhat established earlier, clunkily.
I guess.
Like it fits with that, but the actual dialogue here doesn't really tie those ideas together, not terribly clearly. So again, it just kind of ends up feeling like another half-formed idea. Like it's kind of got that idea of, oh, the M Space Hunter Nebula, the original people that ruled over that planet, they got wiped out because of their science gone amok. Like that's kind of what it's going for with like the pollution angle. But yeah, and yeah. There's and like you've got the idea of, oh, Earth is following a different path. But from what I understand, they removed the ending moment that actually drives that home from the script, where Godzilla and Anguirus, when they're leaving, it's kind of meant to be a sad moment because, yeah, they've technically saved the day, but they've ended up changing nothing. Like the movie, I know the original script or earlier scripts try to communicate that while they've saved the day, like we're still on that path that the aliens warned about, that we're still driving ourselves to our own extinction through pollution.
Because if I remember correctly, it might have been Mabuchi's script, but it was like Godzilla and Anguirus walk through Tokyo, like through Japan silently, and we just get intercut shots of like cars and smokestacks and whatnot. And it's a very sour note. It's very much a Mabuchi script in that regards, because it's like, even though the villains are gone, the true threat's not gone, and Godzilla and Anguirus can't fight that. That's not a monster for them to fight. Right.
Which is, I really like that idea for the ending.
I do too.
I wish that was in the film, because that's a great note to end on, to actually like tie the themes in and be really like commenting, saying something on the issue other than science gone amok bad, pollution bad. That actually at least says a little more than just this basic, completely half-baked version of these ideas. And that's that's kind of what's frustrating about this film, is there's a really good Godzilla movie in here.
Yeah, no, that is it exactly. Like, I think you and I both 100% agree. There's potential in this film. There is 100% potential. And the problem is the film itself is what's like, it's the film limiting itself.
Yes.
They're not giving enough time to these clearly good ideas that could create something that I think is not only well done but unique.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
This could have been a more conventional pollution-based Godzilla film.
Ironically, in some regards, the issue might go back to what the publisher at the beginning of this movie says. It's
exactly
too simplistic.
And that was why I brought that up, because this film almost feels like it's mocking itself with that opening dialogue, because they went through the polls. Kids want a lot of monsters. Kids want monster action. We need to keep it down to this time limit because that's what we need for this. Everything comes down to the bottom dollar. What do the polls say? And that is supposed to be mocked at the beginning of this film.
Yeah.
In a way, this film's kind of smart, but I almost like it's not like All Monsters Attack, where it's like, okay, if you actually look into it, it makes sense, right? At the end of the day, this film is still a half-baked cake. It doesn't matter, no matter how you slice it. They shove in the pollution metaphor. They shove in the anti-science metaphor. They shove in the idea of like basic, too simplistic art. They're not, and like I was looking into it, and at one source was like, this film covers the liberation of women and strong women. I'm like, this film's main woman character is easily one of the weakest in terms of like presence on screen. Like, she's literally just there to do whatever the man can't do.
I mean, it's progressive in the sense that you've got the karate lady and the sister is probably the character with the most agency. Like, I guess that's progressive, but that's not really a theme of the movie.
Right, and it's not like they explore that. Like, this film doesn't explore any of it. It even said, like, it explores hippie culture. It's like, no, not really. It just has a hippie in it.
Hetera explores, like, youth and hippie culture more than this film does.
Right.
There's a whole subplot dedicated to it.
Honestly, it's weird because I remember as a kid, so, like, I've seen this film plenty of times.
Oh, like
as a kid, I remember hating Hetera and thinking Gigan was okay. On this rewatch, I'm going to be honest, completely different. I sit here and I watch this film. I'm like, man, Hetera did this better. Hetera did this better. Hetera did this better. And if you guys remember my ranking, Hetera is not like high up there. So it's just, honestly, this was a really disappointing watch. I'm just going to be real with you. Really disappointing.
Yeah, even for me, like, I wouldn't say I dislike this film, but even compared to, like, my last watch, this was... And the last time I watched this, I think, was, like, either very early this year or late last year was when I last watched this. And, yeah, I had a lot more fun last time. This time was a lot... It kind of was just boring.
Yeah. I had to watch it twice to actually, like, watch it.
Brutal.
That's not a good sign. That's usually a bad thing. Speaking of entertainment, we get more shots of the self-defense force from their one place that they're at, talking about stuff. And the funny thing is, like, they're like, turn on the radio sonar. And he's like, I know that sound. That's King Ghidorah. I don't know what this sound is. It's a new monster. It's like, oh my God.
I'm just going back to that idea for a second of that we mentioned previously about this film having a lot of potential. Like, what I think really shows that is how iconic certain aspects of this film are. Obviously, you've got the characters in this, even though they're completely underbaked, the few traits they do have, you know, people remember this cast. This is one of the casts that are probably, like, generally more positively talked about in the fandom generally of this series. Like, they're not great. I know you don't really like them, but people remember them. Like, if the script gave them more, these could legitimately be some of the best characters in the franchise if they had more to them.
Right.
You've got the monsters themselves, which, like, Gigan is one of the most iconic villains of the franchise, particularly of this era, I'd say, outside of MechaGodzilla. Ghidorah, big name, of course. Godzilla, yeah, you know, it's Godzilla. And then Anguirus, like, this is a film that really, like, you know, this is a film that really highlights Anguirus even more than Destroy All Monsters and Raids Again does. This really is the most iconic film for him as one of the monsters.
Right. This is, I mean, he does the most in this film.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, after this, he became cannon fodder for fake Godzilla and cannon fodder for the explosion of Monster Island.
Right.
Prior to this, you know, he was Godzilla's enemy, and then he was one of the side characters in Destroy All Monsters.
Right. I mean, he gets highlighted in Destroy All Monsters a fair bit more than anyone else, to be fair.
But I would say this, that Anguirus' highlights get brought back in here, and it's only like 2 or 3 times. You know, they reuse those sequences where Anguirus was highlighted.
Yeah.
But in this film, I feel like there's like a couple more moments that really highlight the character. And I feel like this was the film that established him as Godzilla's friend, right?
Yeah, and also that really, like, puts him as, like, that sort of underdog ally for Godzilla.
Yes. This is like the film that established Anguirus as who he was.
Yeah.
Speaking of monsters, we see more Ghidorah and Gigan after this.
Yeah, we get a drawn-out destruction scene with them.
Yeah, we get more footage.
A lot of stock footage for Ghidorah.
Yeah, we get a lot of stock footage from Ghidorah the Three-Headed Monster and Invasion of Astro
But to
Monster.
be fair, there's not much to show for Ghidorah's destruction outside of stock footage.
Right. I do think it was interesting for some of the shots they like reversed it and reanimated the gravity beams, which I thought looked kind of cool. I thought that was an interesting way to do it.
And infamously tried to do day for night as well.
Yes. And then I love how they like reanimated the Mothra versus Godzilla melting of the tanks to be Ghidorah's lightning bolt.
Yeah.
I thought, that's kind of clever.
That is. I did kind of find that funny on this watch.
Now, I will say this. The model city that Gigan destroys here is probably the worst miniatures in the Showa era.
It is just seeing the miniatures Gigan's destroying alongside the ones that the Ghidorah stock footage is crazy, the difference here.
Yeah. It's rough. It's really rough.
They just look the buildings just look so plain and there's barely anything there. It's just under-detailed. It's almost like a Heisei city.
This is the proto Heisei Godzilla film. This is the proto Heisei Godzilla film.
This is where the problems began.
This honestly, it is when you look at it. Like this is probably the beginning of that problem.
I mean, at least this film it's a little more understandable when you consider production time and budget. So, Heisei, I feel like there's a bit less of an excuse there.
Yeah. You got a point there, especially since it was supposed to be higher budgeted stuff.
Yeah. But yeah, no, it's disappointing. And again, like the kaiju scenes in this movie aren't very exciting.
No, the one thing I can say is once Godzilla and Anguirus show up at this industrial complex, it gets a little grungy, and I like that. Like there's some nice lighting towards the end of the fight with all the fire that looks really good. And I'm a sucker for grungy stuff, but
I mean, some of the cinematography for the start of this fight, like the very start when they're still in the water, is cool. The editing isn't great. Like there's a very weird cut when it first cuts to this, because most of the start of the scene it's Godzilla in like the water suit, the 67 suit. But then the first shot you see of the 68 suit. It cuts to like a one shot of just him, nothing really around him. But for like a couple frames, you just see like the suit a little bit later in that shot where his arms are more stretched out. And then it cuts to the start of the shot. It's a really bizarre cut. And it's like obviously a mistake, but it's like, what is that? You know? Do you know what cut I'm talking about?
I think so. Yeah. It's because it's about at the 59-minute 40-second mark. If I'm looking, like if I'm remembering correctly,
exactly 59-minute mark for Criterion.
Yeah. You're right. Because it's probably the beginning of the shot just got doubled.
I think it's the end of the shot. I think it's the end of the shot that it's like there for a second.
Yeah, it's kind of funny that still is here, while like in Godzilla vs. Megalon, they like went back and fixed the edit for like the announced
the bit where they say action.
Yeah. It's funny that like that got fixed in post, but this didn't.
Yeah.
But like you said, there are some interesting shots in the final fight. And this final fight, there's not as much stock footage, which I think really helps us.
Mm-hmm. Right. I mean, this first part of the final, I don't know. I'm mixed on this first part of the final fight because while there's no stock footage in this beginning bit,
it feels pointless.
The editing and geography here is not the strongest.
Right, because it's like, okay, how are we getting to Children's Land? Right? It's like you could easily cut that fight and just get Godzilla and Anguirus to Children's Land to fight Ghidorah and Gigan there.
Oh, I wasn't even specifically talking about that. Just, I mean, it feels a bit slow and choppy, but there's also general geography issues like Anguirus teleporting.
Right.
And then there's this moment that's almost kind of hard to follow where Gigan, like, so after Anguirus has just teleported to behind where he should be, because he was in the water, and then suddenly he's where Godzilla, who's now basically on the opposite side of Anguirus, suddenly next time we see where Anguirus, he's next to Godzilla, pretty much, or approaching him. But there's just this weird moment where weirdly shot, I should say, where Gigan, he like steps on Anguirus to attack Godzilla, and he's like trying to attack Godzilla while he's still on Anguirus. It's shot, edited, and all around, it's a bizarre moment in the fight. It's not entirely the editing's fault there, to be honest, but it's just a weird bit of choreography there.
Right, and honestly, and that issue does carry over into the Children's Land stuff too. I feel like there's a couple moments like that where it's like, okay, why are we doing this? Why is this how the monsters are acting here? What's with this editing decision? Why does Gigan fight Anguirus, walk over to Godzilla, go back to Anguirus?
Right.
Like, it just feels like things are a little all over the place.
I will say one thing I will praise here is I do think this is one of the most fun performances from Haruo Nakajima as Godzilla. Like, this is probably the performance that's like most like recognizable as him almost. Just like in Godzilla's body language with how much, especially how bear-like he acts.
Yes. Also, I don't think we established this, but this was his last time as Godzilla.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
he ended on a banger, I must say.
He did. I think Godzilla, honestly, this might be one of the better Godzilla performances in the Showa era.
Oh, this is definitely one of the best ones, yeah.
It really sucks because, again, this film has so much potential. There's so much potential. And there's so many ideas here that could work. And the original scripts between Mabuchi and Sekizawa, you have something truly special. Something very, truly special. But you don't, none of it comes through.
What you get here is just mediocrity.
Yes. It's too simplistic. Especially with how they end up I'm jumping back into the film here, especially with how they like decide to save the human characters from the Godzilla Tower, which is like send a balloon up and
the balloon zipline.
Yeah, it's like, what the, oh my god. Stupid. And then we get the stupid technology advances.
The carbon is dumb.
Oh my god, it's so
It doesn't even make sense.
No, it doesn't. Oh, I'm getting riled up.
See, the difference. I think the difference between you and me is that you get actively annoyed by the stupidity. I think it's funny.
Yeah, I get annoyed at stupidity because it's part of my job.
I think the carbon is legitimately, it's so dumb that it's just funny.
I've had enough people say, well, what should I do about my own debit card? That I get annoyed when people say stuff that's stupid.
Well, what should I do about my own debit card?
I don't know. It's your debit card. Call your bank. Handle it yourself. Be an adult. I'm half your age. Get it together.
Hey, at least we get Godzilla getting shot in the balls again. That's worth something.
You know, they were like, if we're using stock footage, we're bringing this shot back. You know that. There's no way they weren't like, oh, we can do stock footage from Ghidorah. Oh my god, we have to do that scene. Like, there's no way. There's no way.
Yeah, no, I think all the stock footage does really sour this final fight. It kind of just because so much of it is just stock footage, it ends up making the final fight feel almost less memorable, strangely.
Yeah, I would agree with that, because it's at one point when I was watching, I was like, did they even think about the fact that like what they're doing, like everybody can tell what they're doing? Like, at what point in the production were they like, oh yeah, this is okay? Like, surely there was somebody on set.
Nakano hated using stock footage. Like, he hated the fact that he was forced to do this because of the budgets and schedules. Like, he hated this.
But surely they would have been fine with a shorter runtime.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, that is one thing that confuses me. Like, why not a shorter runtime?
How long is Godzilla versus Megalon? That movie's not that long. It's like a little over an hour.
It is.
It's an hour and 18 minutes. It's 81 minutes?
Japanese cut is 3 minutes longer than American.
It's still okay. 81 minutes. This one's about 90 minutes. Yeah, I mean, I feel like you could cut out like 10, 15 minutes and they would not complain about that.
You could easily cut out 8 minutes of stock footage, and the final fight would flow a lot better.
Yes, easily, very easily.
Like, I can get having stock footage for the Rampage bit, purely because genuinely there is like nothing. There is no Ghidorah Rampage outside of the stock footage.
Right.
Okay, a little bit near the end of the sequence, but generally, like, for Ghidorah-wise, you don't get a lot of him rampaging because they just couldn't do that.
Right.
But the final fight, God no, get rid of the stock footage. It would be a lot more smooth sailing.
Exactly. Like, I think I would be a little less than...
And then you also get rid of like the repeat moments in the final fight too, as well. When it starts repeating bits.
Here's my thing. I would cut out the stock footage. I would cut out the industry area fight. I would literally get Godzilla and Anguirus show up. They go to Children's Land. They fight. Streamline that fight, and then call it quits. This final third, this final act, could easily be reduced to 10 to 15 minutes. Easily. And I'm saying that, and I think the industry area, that Bay area, is the best looking fight in the film.
Yeah.
But
it's not an empty field, so that's probably its advantage.
Right. And it's got nice lighting, and Nakano can do explosions. It just doesn't work. I feel like it's like, okay, Godzilla, Ghidorah, Gigan, and Anguirus are just fighting until they get to Children's Land. Like, what? Why? I just don't get it. I don't understand why they would do like this film's creative decisions are all over the place.
Yeah. There isn't really, I don't know if there's really too much else to say on the fight other than just highlighting like what happens in it. Like Godzilla, obviously everyone knows he goes to the Godzilla Tower. Actually, I will say when he goes to the Godzilla Tower, I do like this moment because it is kind of sad just seeing Godzilla like see this seemingly other member of his species and just trying to recruit him to help and getting completely betrayed.
Right. I do agree.
Where I legitimately feel bad for the big G.
Yeah.
It was probably the only moment in the movie where I felt something.
I felt something when Godzilla bled too, and they clearly Godzilla, this is the first time Godzilla bleeds.
Yeah.
You know, that's they knew that, so they really wanted to make that dramatic, which they do, because then Godzilla falls to the ground and he topples over. I remember Nakano was talking about how like Gigan was supposed to be more powerful, but it was difficult because Godzilla had to beat Gigan, right? It's important to note that in Mabuchi's script, the Daimajin character was actually going to be the one that killed or defeated all three monsters, and Godzilla would only end up killing the alien.
That's right. Yeah,
which I think would have been more interesting. Like Godzilla couldn't even beat, like it'd be Hedorah again. It would be Hedorah all over again. You know, the fact that Godzilla could not beat Hedorah by himself. And Anguirus doesn't really do a lot to beat Gigan. Godzilla just kind of does what he does, and then Gigan retreats. Anguirus does help Godzilla beat King Ghidorah, but it's like, okay, cool, we've seen this before. And it also doesn't help that, like, this is the weakest Ghidorah's ever clearly been.
I mean, yeah, by this point, Ghidorah's just cannon fodder.
Thank God after this, Tanaka was like, we're done with Ghidorah. We're not using him again.
Well, he has one more appearance.
Are we talking the stock footage in Mechagodzilla, or
No,
are we
I'm talking
talking
Zone
Zone
Fighter.
Fighter? Okay.
I was going to say he dies. He doesn't die. That's Gigan, sorry.
Yeah. I'm trying to think, like, yeah, I also thought it was funny that we literally cut from 68 to 65 to 64, back to 68, back to 65. Like, in terms of, like, the editing for Godzilla. It's really funny to see, like, literally, it's like, how did you people think that this was going to be okay?
Yeah, and like they've weirdly like chopped up like bits from 64, and they'll just like have insert shots from like they'll have like a scene from 64, and they'll just put a couple insert shots from 65 for it, and it's like, why?
Yes.
Why?
Yeah. I genuinely don't understand why they made these decisions.
Like, I get they want to have a ton of monster screen time. I get having all that stock footage really does buff it up. But it's so superfluous by the end of it.
Children are not going to be thrilled about insert shots.
Right, exactly. An extra 5 seconds here and there isn't doing a whole lot, especially when you fight. It just makes your fight boring.
She ain't worth it, man. She ain't worth it for that. Meanwhile, our human characters talk to the self-defense force in the same building that they've been in this whole time. Oh, it drives me up the wall, the self-defense force. Oh, it drives me up the wall.
It's fine. Low budget, limited sets. I can forgive that.
I think I'd be more willing if it wasn't for the fact that they have all these other grandiose sets and self-defense force sets. The worst of all of them. Also, this is another film, and Hedera did do this as well, where our main characters end up on a hillside and they just...
Yeah.
React.
That is a pet peeve of mine in some of these movies where, climax just devolves into waiting for the monsters to finish up for like 15 minutes. This
is the first time that we've had our characters completely safe of harm. Like, once they set the explosions and run off, they're done.
Right.
The cockroaches kill themselves, and then, like, all they do now is just stand and stare.
Yeah.
And that's, there's still it's probably about
15 minutes left. There is 15 minutes left by this point.
And the rest of the fight is reaction shots, the death of the cockroaches, and our main characters, or in our main kaiju fighting each other.
I mean, like, don't get me wrong, this is probably the most fun bit of the fight.
Oh my god, I just felt like I was watching Noise.
I mean, I feel like that's most of this movie. It's kaiju action.
No. You're right. You're 100% right. You're 110% right. This film, I literally was watching it. The first time I was watching it, I was like, oh my god, this is Noise. I'm watching Noise. And then on the second time, tonight, I was like, oh my god, I'm literally watching Noise. I'm getting nothing out of this. I have no idea what I'm watching. I don't care. Oh my god!
It like the fight here is really only enjoyable in like the brief little bits of just these amusing moments, like when Godzilla's just teabagging Gigan. Like, that's hilarious.
I will say, seeing Godzilla apparently dead as Ghidorah and Gigan loom over him is kind of like a pretty, like, oh my god, this is happening. But I should not be sitting through a 20-minute fight just to get that for a few seconds. Like, it's not played off well at all, because that happens, and then, like, 40 seconds later, it's over. And we don't even linger on that. Godzilla just gets back up, and he's strong again. Literally, in the English dub, they say, Godzilla's strong again! Oh my god. The Hong Kong dub's garbage, by the way. I'm getting really grouchy.
Yeah, I can tell.
Oh my god. It is cool to see the suit falling apart. Like, narratively, that makes sense, and I think it works. And then the last 10 minutes is literally just Godzilla and Anguirus fighting Gigan and then fighting Ghidorah. Like, the cockroaches die.
With poor editing, by the way.
Yeah, very poor editing.
Like, there's screen direction issues with, like, Gigan. Like, when he tries retreating, you'll see him going left, and then when he's shot down, it'll just cut to, like, him falling right way, like, right side.
Yeah.
And then they have this great shot where Godzilla, like, where Anguirus, like, uses his spikes, like, jumps against Ghidorah while Godzilla's holding him there, and then Godzilla just throws him over. That is awesome. But then they repeat it again and again.
Right.
And it loses its impact. And then the third one is just edited poorly as well.
Yeah. Also, I'm pretty sure, isn't there stock footage from Ibra during this?
There might be. I know they use, like,
I think so.
DAM where Godzilla's just stomping on Ghidorah's head.
Yeah. Eventually, they both run away, and Godzilla kind of just stares off into the sky, and our human characters are like, hey!
Peace
We're
isn't
fine.
easy.
And
Technology is good, but also bad.
cockroaches might inherit the earth. Oh my god.
We do get
And
the
then they're
Godzilla
like-
march, though.
Yeah, they're like, goodbye, Godzilla! And then we get the Godzilla March, which is actually a banger. I quite enjoy the
I
Godzilla
love that song.
that genuinely is the best part of this film. Genuinely is the Godzilla March. I'm not surprised that AIP canceled plans to release the film. I'm not surprised they said, Toho, we're not going to do this. It ended up getting released by Cinema Shares in the US, released as Godzilla on Monster Island with all the violence edited out. I'm sure that cut is even worse.
Probably,
Oh boy.
yeah. I mean, hey, maybe it being shorter is better.
Maybe. You
I
want to
don't
know
know.
something crazy?
What?
This is the most successful 70s Godzilla movie.
Yeah, that is crazy. I know it did better. I knew it did better than Hedorah.
It was the cheapest.
Mind you.
It was cheaper than Hedorah, so it had a higher net profit.
Sure, yeah.
And it had the highest audience of any of the four films. Probably because of Ghidorah, to be honest. Let's be real here.
Probably, yeah, honestly.
But God, this movie's not good. I mean, it's not bad. It's not bad. It's not a bad movie, but it's not good.
It's just a complete mixed bag from beginning to end. It's just mildly sad.
It's not mildly. It's depressing. And the movie's over. Are you ready to go into final thoughts?
Yeah.
You want me to start, or do you want to start?
Go ahead.
Godzilla vs. Gigan is a bore fest, plain and simple. Like it's the narrative is choppy. Like honestly, I do not like the cutting back from our humans to the aliens to the monsters to the humans. It's really repetitive. It doesn't flow very well. It's just very choppy. It's very boring, and the characters, the only memorable thing about them is what they look like and like their quirks. If it wasn't for their quirks, this film would have nothing for their human characters. And I'm not about to see a movie where they're saying, I'm not like other actors, I'm quirky. I don't care. This is basically Invasion of Astro Monster, but with a quarter of the budget and less interesting ideas.
Mm-hmm.
It just, the film is just noise. It's just a noisy film, and everything that they set up in the film is just underdeveloped and boring.
Right.
Like every metaphor in this film becomes mute. It doesn't matter what they're saying, what they're doing. It's just, it doesn't work.
Right. Yeah. No. This Godzilla vs. Gigan is just a completely half-baked movie. Just the lack. It's been stripped down to the bare minimum of elements for a functional film that
I would
just tries to make up for it by by just lots of monster screen time. And unfortunately, the monster screen time due to poor editing, the stock footage, of course, and just being very slow in how it's also, like, outside of this, like, the stock footage is edited pretty fast, but the actual new footage is edited pretty slowly. So it ends up really showing how boring this new footage is.
Right.
Outside of the few, like, really, really dramatic moments.
I would venture as far as to say that Godzilla vs. Gigan is what I think Gigan and Megalon in a general sense is what people think of, like when they say, oh, Godzilla King of the Monsters 2019 is like the Showa Godzilla movies. I think it's Gigan and Megalon that they're talking about.
I mean, yeah, and Megalon is, of course, the infamous, like, oh, those bad old Godzilla movies. Like, it is the poster child of that idea.
It's the penultimate.
And Gigan is, like, very closely related to that. Gigan, like, came out, like, what, around the same time? Like, a year after, was it?
Yeah, Gigan came out after.
Yeah.
In America, at least.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Yeah,
so,
and...
these are essentially the poster children for that.
Yeah, and it's not very beneficial.
It's almost understandable where the misconceptions of this franchise come from.
Yeah,
when you look at just these two films in a vacuum.
And when you realize that these two films were widely distributed.
Yeah, and you realize they're both really boring.
I'm curious when we cover Megalon because I was
so bored last time I watched Megalon.
I actually have a pretty fond memory of Megalon.
I think this movie at least has a somewhat interesting human drama. Megalon's is legitimate. I have nothing to latch onto except for Jet Jaguar in Megalon.
That one will be an interesting watch. I think watching that one.
I think I'll hate it.
I'm curious on where we'll end up.
I don't think I'll like it.
I definitely know this. Gigan has went way down. Like, granted, I think it's probably more of a mid initially, but now it's probably lower mid, upper bad, right? If we're doing tiers, which we don't do tiers, we do rankings, but that's where I would put it in a tiers, like upper bad, lower mid.
I mean, a lot of the value for Gigan for me comes from, like, just the fact that this is one of the first Godzilla movies I saw. Like, this was either the second or third one I saw.
Right. Are we ready for cast and crew?
Yeah, go ahead.
Hiroshi Ishikawa played Gengo Kodaka. Umeda Tomoko played Machiko Shima, who was in Battle Fever J. Yukihiro Hishimi played Tomoko, who was in Ultraman Zerth 2, Ultraman Mebius and Ultra Brothers, Ultra 8 Brothers, Silver Mask, Ultra 7, and Garo Makaisenki.
I was about to say, it almost seemed like you were skipping over Ultra 7 there, which is funny.
Minoru Takashima played Masasaku Tagusugi, was in Dodsukedan, the Akira Kurosawa film, Kamen Rider V3, and Kikaida. Susumu Fujita played Sudo Fumio. Toshiaki Nishizawa played Kabuto, who was in Mysterious Operation, Spider-Man, Space Sheriff Gavin, Space Sheriff Shirvan, Space Sheriff Scheider, Sukiban Daka 2, Space Sheriff Gavin the movie. He was the voice actor for Dallas in Alien.
What the hell?
And he was the Japanese voice actor for Egon in Ghostbusters. Kunio Mirai played Takashi Shima, was in Watori, The Snake Woman's Curse, The Return of Godzilla, Godzilla Mothra, King Ghidorah, Giant Monsters All Out Attack, Submersion of Japan, the 73 one, and Tokyo Ghoul, the 2017 film. Now, for the crew, I have covered every single one of these people in previous Godzilla episodes. If you want to hear their full Tokusatsu Kaiju credits, go check out Ibra and Godzilla vs. Hedorah. Written by Shinichi Sekizawa, music by Akira Ifukube, although only in stock. Produced by Tomoyuki Tanaka, special effects directed by Teruyoshi Nakano, and the film was directed by Jun Fukuda. I think we're down to 2 things left.
I think it's ranking time now.
Now, for anybody, if you're jumping in on our Gigan episode, just so you know, we have covered all the films prior, and we've covered -1 and GXK in this ranking. So, to get our full thoughts on all these films, you're going to have to go back and listen to all of those. What's your number? My number 14 is Godzilla Raids Again.
Yeah, likewise.
And if I remember correctly, we agreed on 13.
I believe it was Godzilla Kong: The New Empire?
Yes. Now, this is probably where we're gonna start getting mixed up. I cannot stand Mothra versus Godzilla, so that's my number 12. It's boring. It's more. The only thing that film's got is it's got a good score. Everything else in the movie's boring. It's so boring. And the cast is good. I like the cast.
Yeah. Of course, Takarada's in it. I've got... Not gonna lie, I'm almost reconsidering my ranking at this one, but no, I think I'm going to stick to what I've got. I've got at number 12, Destroy All Monsters.
Interesting. Okay, my number 11 is Godzilla vs. Gigan. It has more memorable things than Mothra versus Godzilla, but it is more boring in the final fight than what my number 11 is. Or my number 10. Excuse me, my number 10.
Well, it appears this is one place where we mirror each other, because I've also got at number 11, Godzilla vs. Gigan.
Really? Okay,
Yeah.
so is your number... So my number 10 is Destroy All Monsters.
I've got All Monsters Attack.
Interesting. See, the reason I put Destroy All Monsters above Gigan is because the final fight in Destroy All Monsters is more memorable than everything in Godzilla vs. Gigan.
Sure. I don't know. I think Gigan has a lot of actually like legitimately memorable parts. But the fight itself is really boring. That is what drags down the movie a lot for me. Like,
I think
sometimes
both.
when I watch it, if I've been in the right mood for Gigan before, and when I'm in the right mood for it, I generally do like it a bit more. Like, it'd probably be like a spot maybe 2 above where it is now at most. But this time, this go around, it wasn't an easy watch.
It was rough. Yeah, it was really rough.
It wasn't even like super rough. I just wasn't excited or really feeling anything from it.
Yeah, that's fair. See, I will say this: Destroy All Monsters has a worst cast. Like, in terms of like the characters,
they're far
sucky.
less memorable. It's very sad, because there is just that one little moment where Kenji Sahara just steals the show for no reason, and he's great.
That being said, I think Destroy All Monsters has better effects and a better final fight.
Sure,
and that's and a better score.
Yeah, Destroy All Monster does have those highlight scenes of just really cool spectacle.
And like, but see, to me, the spectacle isn't everything, which is why both of these are like lower.
Oh no,
lower
100%.
ranking.
Spectacle only goes so far.
Right. Your number 10 was what?
All Monsters Attack.
Okay. My number 9's Ibra, Horror of the Deep.
I mean, our lists from this point forth are pretty much the same as what we've previously said. So I've got 8 Mothra versus.
I've got. We were on 9.
Oh, 9 is Ibra for me. My bad.
Oh, yeah. So we agree on 9. 8 for me is Son of Godzilla as well.
I've got that at 7.
My number 7 is All Monsters Attack.
6, King Kong versus Godzilla.
Godzilla versus Hedorah.
Damn, cringe. 5, Astro Monster.
5 is King Kong versus Godzilla.
Hedorah at 4 for me.
4 is Invasion of Astro Monster.
Right. 3, I've got Ghidorah.
3, I've got 54.
That's my number 2.
My number 2 is Godzilla -1.
Hey, that's my number 1.
Ghidorah the Three-Headed Monster is my number 1. Honestly, our lists are starting to get very interesting, because it seems like a lot of mid stuff we agree.
Yeah,
and we agree on like mid stuff, like dead on like mid and dead on like not good. We agree on, but it's like the things in between and the good things is where we like actually disagree.
I mean, I think I think with a lot of the sort of lesser entries on our list, I think we're both just having the same issue with these films, that there's not, with some of these films, there's just not a lot to grab onto. Specifically, this film, Gigan and Destroyer Monsters, there's not a lot to latch onto here.
Mm-hmm. Now, okay, out of curiosity, and we don't have to dive into this now, but I'm curious. Would you be able to determine from your numeral ranking, like what is bad, what is not good, what is okay, what is good, what is great?
I mean, I've got an idea what I don't know. I mean, the thing is, it's like some of these movies on like my rankings, it's like some of them, it's like I'm not even 100% sure on if I would necessarily agree with where I place them on like another watch, you know? Like, I mean, some of the like earlier ones that we covered, like Mothra vs. Godzilla, I want to rewatch just because it's been like a few years since I've seen that now. Since it's been a few years since we covered it. King Kong vs. Godzilla as well. I'd like to, and Raids Again, I'd like to rewatch. And yeah, I don't know. I feel like I've got this ranking, but it's this rankings like this kind of make my opinion seem more black and white than they really are. Where it's like, I don't know, ranking just like a purely numerical ranking from worst to best on a franchise as varied as Godzilla almost kind of oversimplifies it a little. Right.
And like, I think we can both agree on this. Like, there are things that like
at the second bottom film, I've got Godzilla Kong: The New Empire. But also, I'm not going to deny the fact that I find it really entertaining. I've seen it like 5 times this year, and it was hilarious every single time.
Right. And so if we're going to use Godzilla Kong as an example here, I have went on record. I've said it on the show. I like the zero gravity fight. I think it's really fun. I think that's the best part of the movie. I think that's fun.
I think that's funny.
That scene beats everything in Mothra versus Godzilla because I can actually remember that fight.
Damn.
Now, that being said, the cast and the soundtrack of Mothra versus Godzilla bumps it up because that alone makes me more interested in Mothra versus Godzilla than a single 3-minute sequence in Godzilla Kong: The New Empire. But that one scene in Godzilla Kong: The New Empire is more entertaining than everything in Mothra versus Godzilla. So like it's not like, oh my god, like this film is better in every way. There are things that like Godzilla Kong: The New Empire does better than Mothra versus Godzilla. That being said, there are a plethora of things that like Godzilla versus Gigan does better than Godzilla Kong. You know, and there are a few things like I think Godzilla Raids Again has some better use of lighting than Godzilla Kong: The New Empire, but it's still at my very bottom. If I were to answer my question, I would say that I would only say there's one bad Godzilla movie we've covered so far, and that's Godzilla Raids Again. I have never been able to like that movie. It is so rushed. It's so boring.
Hey, I'll find out. I'll find out in like a week or two when I rewatch it in cinemas.
Now, like personally, I would put From Godzilla Kong to Destroy All Monsters as not good. They're not bad, but they're not good. They're okay, right? Like, okay, if I need to throw something in, sure.
I would
fine,
include Gigan in that, by the way.
Yeah, Gigan. So my not good would be Godzilla Kong, Mothra versus Gigan, Destroy Monsters. And then what I would define as good.
I wouldn't include that one.
It's so boring. Now, for my what I would define as good would be Ibra to King Kong versus. So that's Ibra, Son of Godzilla, All Monsters Attack, Hedorah, King Kong versus. That's probably because I like what's going on in them, whether it's the execution of the story or it's the thematic elements, something that makes me think more, something that makes me appreciate them more. All of those films have those for me. Hedorah and Son of God, or not Hedorah. I would honestly say Ibra, Son of Godzilla, All Monsters Attack, and Hedorah. Actually, okay, let me restart. Everything in this category has surprised me upon our rewatches. That has made me appreciate them more. because I did not like them. And all of these films have grown and have rose to the occasion, and I have actually thought they were good. And then Astro Monster, it's a great it's a great space opera. It's got great cinematography, great effects, iconic cast, iconic soundtrack, everything. 54, you can't go wrong, right? It's literally one of the greatest monster movies of all time. Godzilla -1, same thing. You can't go wrong. It's literally one of the greatest monster movies produced in the 21st century. And Ghidorah the Three-Headed Monster, I think, is one of the few Godzilla films that is, if not perfect, almost perfect. I love Ghidorah the Three-Headed Monster. I think it is amazing. Probably top 25 films of all time. I love it. Same with -1. I would put -1 and Ghidorah easily top 25. Easily.
I mean, -1 is one of those movies I would say is borders on perfect.
Right. And like the reason 54 is not up there is because you have to be in a mood for it, right? It's a very somber and dark film. If I'm not in the mood for it, I'm not going to watch it. It's also it could be boring if you're not wanting to like sit there and just like contemplate life. You know, it's a thinking film.
I disagree. It slows down near the end, but most of the movie is actually quite fast paced.
I might have to rewatch it. I
would say the first 2 acts are legitimately quite fast.
I'd be interested now that I've watched more Japanese cinema if I would feel any different. Because I would argue that film is trying to not be a monster movie per se. Does that make sense?
Kind of.
Like I feel like obviously
it's a little vague, but
at the core of it, it's supposed to be a drama.
Sure, yeah.
So I feel like I might, now that I've watched more dramas and more Japanese cinema, maybe I could watch that and be like, oh, yeah, that makes more sense. I don't know. Just food for thought. So, yeah, that's Godzilla versus Gigan.
Yeah, I'm kind of disappointed.
Yeah, me too. I'm kind of upset that I rewatched it.
Honestly, yeah, I should have just left it on my last rewatch.
Yeah.
Maybe I shouldn't have rewatched it earlier this year and saved it. Maybe I would have liked it more then.
I'm happy, though, that you and I, it's number 11 for both of us, right?
I think so, yeah.
So we didn't disagree. Even though, like, I probably am a little more hard on it than you are.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, we don't disagree, which is kind of crazy. I'm just more negative on my rankings than you are.
Yeah, you hate Godzilla.
I do. There's not look there's one type of person that hates Godzilla movies, and that's a Godzilla fan.
That's so true.
It's like Star Wars. The only people that hate Star Wars are Star Wars fans.
Real.
I got one more thing to tell you.
And what's that?
Hello, I'm Elijah, and I have a Kaiju and Tokusatsu problem. Joking aside, I am Elijah Thomas. I am a writer. I've written for GodzillaMovies.com and in Kaiju Ramen Magazine and Kaiju United, of which I am the Chief Innovative Officer for. My writing has also been featured in the book Giant Bug Cinema, a Monster Kids Guide from Bear Manor Media, where I wrote about Ghidorah, the Three-Headed Monster. I've also been given the privilege to work with my good friends at Giant Monster BS, Grattan and Matt, on their newest season, Season 2, where they're covering independent kaiju films. Outside of writing and podcasting, I have also served as a consultant on the upcoming Titanic Creations officially licensed Yongari articulated figure. Go to titanicreations.com/Yongari to order yours today. I have also had the privilege to produce bonus features for SRS Cinema. I have worked on Yuzo, The Biggest Battle in Tokyo, Liverleaf, War of the Ninja Monsters, Jiron vs. Gora, the upcoming release of Sharkdemic, and did I talk about Hoshi 35?
I think so.
I don't know. I'm doing Hoshi 35, by the way. If anybody didn't know that. I don't know.
Now they do.
Maybe I just revealed that. Maybe I didn't. I don't know. I feel like I talked about that last time. I don't remember. You can order all of those Blu-rays on srscinema.com. Yuzo and Liverleaf have wide DVD releases available from any major online retailer. I'm also a filmmaker and YouTuber. You can check out my stuff on my YouTube channel, ET13 Productions, where you can see some of my short films, such as SOS Seek Shelter, Bio Project, and The Invisible Teacher. along with my old YouTube videos and a playlist that features all of my appearances on YouTube. I'm going to continue to posting old student films as time goes on, so definitely check that out. You can also check out my action figure photography on my Instagram at et13_productions and my ex, the artist formerly known as Twitter, thanks Danny, at the same handle. Rex, where can people find you at?
Well, dear listeners, you can find me on YouTube at Rexino, on Twitter at Rex_Xenomorph, and on Instagram, Rex_Xeno. And if you want to check out some of my writing, go take a look at the Tokusatsu Network.
And as for the podcast, don't forget to rate us on iTunes. That boosts our ratings and helps us get recommended to more people just like you. If you don't have an Apple device, which I don't blame you, that's a lie. I'm reading a MacBook. It literally says MacBook Pro at the bottom of the screen. But you can rate us on Spotify now. That's something they allow you to do. To stay up to date with all things Kaiju Conversation related, head over to www.kaijuconversation.com to find all of our episodes, social media, news, and updates. Follow us on Twitter at KAIJU_CONVERS. If you don't have Twitter, you can follow us on Instagram or like us on Facebook. If you're like me before podcasting and you don't have any social media, lucky you. You can email us at kaijuconversation@gmail.com, all lowercase, all one word, you know the drill. And as always, we'll read your reviews on air for everyone to hear. We also have a Teespring store. Eventually we'll have original artwork on there, but until then you can sport our awesome logo on a t-shirt or maybe even a coffee mug. If you'd like to chat with us, check out our Discord server full of others that have similar interests to you. Recently in our General 1 chat, there was a conversation about...
What a fascinating conversation.
Big Hollywood movies and the Monsterverse. It's a great community full of great people. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the bell. Jesus fucking Christ, I need to slow the fuck down. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the bell so you can be notified anytime we upload a video. We sometimes post exclusives to the channel like bloopers for episodes or minisodes talking about news or other subjects. We also have an interview with Mechagodzilla designer Jared Krzyzewski on the channel, and I definitely butchered his name. I'm so sorry about that. And a huge thanks to Rex for editing all of these episodes and all the other content we upload. His links can be found in the description below. Along with Rex, we'd like to give a huge thanks and shout out to Danny DiManna of the Godzilla Novelization Project for his amazing vocals on our theme song. You can support him by following him on Twitter at Danzilla93_GNP or visit his website, GodzillaNovelizationProject.com. And a huge thanks to Grattan Conwell from the podcast Giant Monster BS for composing the music for our theme song. You can support him by following the podcast on Twitter at Giant Monster BS or on any podcast platform under the name Giant Monster BS. And with that, we're going to wrap things up here. So thank you guys so much for listening. Episode 1 of Godzilla Month 2024 is already done. Godzilla vs. Gigan. It's out of the way. Thank God.
What is next?
Who knows? One must wait till we can find out. Unless you're listening to this in the past, then you already know.
Might relate to a Megalon.
Or future. I meant future. But if you're listening from the future, that means you must know that what comes after this is me telling you to remember, as always, please remember, life's too short to not talk big. Bye, guys.
Bye.
We are set, we are in debt, there's nothing to sweat. Life's too short now, baby. And not too big now, baby. Conversation. His name's Elijah, baby. And also Rex now, baby. We love those kaiju, baby. And you will too now.